Okay, we should be live. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world, tuning in to This Week in Tech, the weekly show that we do every Thursday. It's been kind of slow this week, I would say, in terms of the technology news. There are a couple of interesting things that I kind of thought were worth talking about. I'm not really sure what all we're going to talk about. The stream might not be as long as it normally is, depending on how quick we get through some of these articles. But we're kind of in a slow period for those that are technology enthusiasts. Hey, RK, good evening. We're in one of those slow periods where at this point in time, all the enthusiast grade hardware is relatively mature now. There isn't really anything new coming out anytime soon. We're going to be waiting until probably Q3 at the earliest. Yeah, we'll try to have fun on this stream. It usually ends up that we veer off on tangents, and that usually ends up being the more interesting part of the stream. So we'll see what happens in this one. Hopefully that's the case, because I don't really have a whole lot to talk about other than some of these articles that we're going to try to get through here. So I guess let's get into this first one. PlayStation VR2 official PC support is coming this year. Sony confirms. So this is something that I originally, when the PSVR2 headset came out, I think it was a year ago, if I'm not mistaken. I thought that they should have done this day one, but I guess they really wanted this to be attached. They wanted to improve the attach rate of people who had the console with VR, but I really think that they should have let this work on the PC day one, because the PlayStation VR2 is actually one of the best modern VR headsets. It has the foveated rendering, meaning the insides, internals of the headset actually tracks your pupils of your eyes as they move around, which is something that older VR headsets don't have. I think the Meta Quest 3 does have foveated, but the older ones, maybe the Quest 2 also had it, but I know like the original one didn't. And all the old VR headsets that have the wire attached to it, like the Oculus Rift, the Rift S, the HTC Vive, I think the Valve Index also doesn't have foveated rendering. Anyway, the point is, the VR2 headset from PlayStation is actually one of the best modern VR headsets on the market, and it is tethered, so it does have a wire, like the old classic ones. It's not wireless like the Meta Quest 3, but that means that it has lower latency. So I have one of these, and it's actually pretty good. I don't really use it that much because I can't really use it with the PC, to be honest. So this is good news for me, because once this gets official PC support, now technically, okay, just to kind of give a little bit of background on PlayStation VR2 on PC, technically, it is possible to use the PlayStation VR2 on Linux. You have to have a AMD, well, I don't know if the old Nvidia 20 series works. You have to have an AMD graphics card that has the USB-C port, because the PlayStation VR headset has a USB-C cable. There's no display port, there's no HDMI. It is a USB-C, so it uses DisplayPort alt mode. However, on Linux, somebody got it working last summer. I forgot, there was a Twitter post. Somebody managed to get it working on Linux. He actually made, I think he used like a Raspberry Pi. He made like an intermediate device that he plugged the headset into on the USB-C, and then he plugged the USB-C from the little circuit board that he had into the PC, and he got it working. And he actually did something where he actually got it to work on PC with that third-party little custom silicon box that he made plus Linux. So you had to have Linux and the third-party box in line between the VR headset and the Windows PC for it to actually work on Windows. So this is actually good because that now, like in the end, he said that it wasn't feasible because unless he had enough startup funding to make that like mass produce that chip, not chip, but like that FPGA, it wouldn't be possible. And then he also was kind of afraid about how Sony would react to that. Would they threaten with litigation, lawsuits, that kind of thing? So he kind of like, the project kind of died off. But fast forward now, and it looks like Sony's considering bringing it to PC. I mean, we'll see. That remains to be seen. I really hope this is true because I myself, so I use, if I'm playing VR on the PC, I'm using an old Oculus Rift. So I have a very old Oculus Rift that I have had since 2018. And that isn't even when that was new. I bought the Oculus Rift when it was like on clearance. So it was out the door in 2018. That was like the last year you could get one, brand new. I think it originally came out in 2016. So my VR headset, technically, if we're going by when it was first available, I'm using a VR headset that's 8 years old. That is crazy to think that VR headset is that old, technology-wise. So upgrading to this, I can only imagine this would be a massive upgrade. I have used this on PlayStation 5. This is significantly better than the Oculus Rift. It is more comfortable. The controllers are much better than the ones that were on the original Oculus Rift. But if I'm playing VR, the way it is right now, if I play VR on PlayStation, obviously I'm using VR2. If I'm on PC, I'm using an ancient Oculus Rift, which still works fine, so I'm going to use it. But anyway, if their PC VR support is as bad, hey Nero, so controller support on PC? Well, that's the thing. Like, they're going to have to... See, I don't know... I have a feeling that they're going to have to do some kind of custom... Like, they're going to have some kind of very custom driver for this to work. Because... Has anyone used the Meta Quest 2 or 3 on the PC? If so, how do you guys get that to connect to the PC? Because that's wireless. Do you connect it initially over USB? Or what is the interface that works with? Because this thing, I can tell you right now, I have tried to get the PlayStation VR2 to work on my PC. Now, the thing is, you have to have this type of graphics card. You have to have a graphics card that has a USB-C. If I plug the PlayStation VR2 directly into my Radeon 7900 XTX via the USB-C, it will come up. It will appear in Windows like a monitor. It'll appear as an extended display. So if I put the VR headset on, I can see my desktop. So technically, it works with PC over DisplayPort Alt mode. However, the way the PlayStation VR2 presents itself to the operating system through the default driver over the USB-C cable is as though it were a monitor. So you can't use it with VR games and VR apps, because it only shows up as an extended display. So that's the way it works today, and you have to plug it in to a graphics card that has a USB-C port. You cannot plug it in to the motherboard. Trust me, I've tried it, nothing happens. So it has to connect to a graphics card. So I would imagine if Sony wants this to work, either it'll require the user to have either a AMD 7000 or 6000 series reference graphics card, and when I say reference, I mean reference graphics card, one that actually has. Now some custom AIB cards do have the USB-C, but this one, like this one as another example, the 6950 XT, the 6900, the 6800 XT. All of these graphics cards feature a USB-C that has full DisplayPort Alt mode in them. The Nvidia ones, if you want to have if you want this to work on Nvidia, you have to have a 20 series. Like for example, I think a 2060, a 2060, 2070, and 2080 and 2080 Ti. They also have, as we're talking reference cards. We're not talking about AIBs. We're talking about reference cards. So the 20 series reference cards feature USB-C. So do the Radeon 6000 and Radeon 7000 reference cards. Now, not all of them. Only in the case of AMD, it has to be the higher end cards. So the 7900 XT, the XTX, the 6900 XT, the 6800 XT, all of those cards feature USB-C. But if you go further down the stack, like for example, the 7700 XT, I don't think this, yeah, see, this one doesn't have USB-C. The 7800 XT, that doesn't have USB-C. So if this is really going to take off, they're going to need either some kind of custom driver that allows it to work over a 20 gigabit, maybe a 20 gigabit USB-C, or at least a 10 gigabit USB-C. But it would need, like, if it's going to connect to a motherboard, because the user doesn't have a graphics card that has DisplayPort Alt mode over USB, then it's going to be harder to work, and it's going to be more challenging for them to develop that driver for it to actually work. So, if their Steam can emulate DualShock and DualSense, yeah, I mean, if I plug this into my PC, it works with most modern games, but I prefer not to use it. If I'm going to play on PC, I actually use the Xbox Series X controller. This is the one that I'd recommend. But yeah, that's completely off topic. Hey, EGM. MetaQuest should use USB-C. Yeah, so see that would indicate that Facebook Meta has some kind of driver that is able to get it to access the GPU over USB for the encoding. I think I don't fully understand exactly what all the hardware is in the Meta. I think ever since Rift DK2, it should be USB-C display. No, so okay. I have the original Oculus Rift. The original Oculus Rift uses HDMI. So my VR headset that I use is HDMI. The Oculus Rift S has DisplayPort. I also have that one. I actually don't use that one. That one's actually in storage, and that's because I like the built-in headphones that are featured on the original Oculus Rift. But yeah, so Oculus Rift original is HDMI. Oculus Rift S is DisplayPort. So right around the time of the S was when a lot of the newer VR headsets featured DisplayPort. And then I don't know what... So you're saying that USB-C is what MetaQuest is using. So yeah, I guess Sony was going to have to develop some kind of custom driver if this is going to actually work on over a motherboard USB-C port. Otherwise, they'd have to make an adapter that it takes USB-C and converts that to DisplayPort. That's what they would have to do for the majority of people who have graphics cards, because I'm pretty sure not a lot of people have a graphics card that has a native USB-C. I feel like if they want to get this out the door immediately, they should just release it and requires them to have a USB-C. So that means anybody on an Nvidia 20 series reference or an AMD, most of the high-end AMD reference cards, they all have USB-C. And some of the AIB cards, like XFX, has one that has USB-C. So it's not like it's impossible, but I think for most users, they would have to include some kind of adapter, or they would have to make it kind of like Oculus, or I guess the Quest, where it connects over USB-C. I need to look into that, because I don't really know much about how the Meta Quest 3 works. I was actually thinking of getting the Meta Quest 3 last year when I know we did a big live stream and we talked about the Meta Quest 3 on one of those streams, and that was actually what was making me think of getting one, but I ended up not doing it. So, because I figured, I can just keep using the Oculus Rift, There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I'll tell you though, it's weird playing VR on the PlayStation, and the games on the PlayStation 5 with the PS VR2 actually look better than the way the games look on PC because I'm using such an old VR headset. So the VR headset makes a big difference. And I have a feeling if Sony made this, like if they released this PC support, like these will be sold out pretty much instantly because I don't think they manufacture that many of these to begin with. And this is okay, it's kind of an expensive VR headset, but it is a very good VR headset. So yes, it has the wire. It's not wireless, but you don't have to worry about batteries. The controllers have rechargeable. It's fully rechargeable, just like the controllers, the actual DualSense controllers. So, $80 for the MetaQuest Link cable. Oh, so you have to have that. So does the hold on? So does the MetaQuest, like if you want to use it with the PC, you have the cable is sold separately? It's not sold as a bundle? Because I would hope that they would offer like a bundle. Can you buy those controls? I don't think so, Marcelo. I think if you buy this, it's like the whole thing. It comes with it's an entire set, basically. But this is good because this is another thing. Like remember we were talking about last week where we talked about how Microsoft is trying to move away from the console? This is a good move. I think this is a smart move on Sony's part. If they want to sell more hardware, aka VR headsets, offering PC support, official PC support with this headset is an easy move. That is like the smartest thing to do, really. Because there's a ton of people that would definitely buy one of these, but they don't want to play on PlayStation. So, but if they could get this and use it on a PC, like they'd get this. Because I mean, seriously, like this VR headset is one of the best VR headsets right now. The color, I don't know what is I forgot. It uses some kind of special lens. It's like the foveated rendering plus some sort of lens, some kind of layered glass or something. I forgot exactly. It's been a long time since I read up on the VR2. The PS VR2. All I know is it's actually a legit good VR headset. So yeah, if they have PC support on this thing's gonna sell out like really fast. Carl's saying you definitely buy one if it was on PC. See, exactly. I feel like there's a lot of people out there that would easily get one of these if it worked on PC. So, yeah, I don't know when it's going to get support. Like, does it say in here? So it says in a new post on the official Sony blog or PlayStation blog detailing some upcoming games, Sony Interactive Entertainment Content Communications Manager Gillian McAllister confirmed that the company is currently testing the ability for PlayStation VR2 to access additional games on PC to offer even more game variety in addition to the PlayStation VR2. So official PC support is expected to come. I don't know. That's kind of a little. This is sort of indicating that, but I don't think this fully implies that it's going to be official PC support. The lack of official PC support was hardly surprising given how its predecessor couldn't be used on PC. The thing is, somebody did manage to get the original PlayStation VR with those Move controllers working on PC. But the PSVR 2, the only reason why the PSVR 2 is so hard to get working on PC is because it uses that USB-C cable. Like I said earlier, we kind of talked about that. If you have an AMD 7000 series card or 6000 series card with a USB-C, technically it could work if Sony released some kind of driver to get it to install on Windows and expose itself to the operating system as a VR headset instead of a monitor, because that's the way it works right now. So, I don't know. Maybe this is something that I might make a video about, like a separate video showing how it works on PC today, and then like what needs to change for it to work, like officially as a VR headset. The basic cable on the Quest can be used to link on PC. Let's see, but it is bandwidth limited. Yeah, because this is interesting. This is one of the more interesting articles that came out. Just to kind of piggyback off of that, since we're talking about PlayStation. Speaking of PlayStation 5, so PlayStation 5 Pro is also coming out later this year. So this will probably handle the VR2 headset a lot better than the original PlayStation 5. So that could make games like Resident Evil, Village VR. I think Resident Evil 4 is getting a VR mode, if I'm not mistaken. Some of that stuff that you can only play on PlayStation VR, you can't actually do it on PC for whatever reason. They would look a lot better with the Pro model in VR. So it says it's being marketed as a 120 FPS 4K. Okay, see, this is the sort of stuff. This is the sort of stuff that when you hear these claims, you have to coat the entire claim with an entire bucket of salt. Because this is not true. Like, okay, 120 FPS 4K. Pretty much there's no PC today that can pull it. There's no graphics card powerful enough to run every game. Like the average 4K, the average native 4K game is not running at 120 FPS. Okay, maybe on a 4090 at like medium settings, like you could run most things close to 120, but not really. So when they say, they've changed the wording on this, because I remember the first time we started hearing about the PlayStation 5 Pro, all the rumors were saying that it's for 8K gaming. 8K gaming. Now they've changed it. Now it's no longer 8K gaming. It's now 120 FPS 4K gaming. So they've kind of it's gone down. Now it's probably going to go down even more. So when I read stuff like this, like if a manufacturer claims that a graphics card is an 8K graphics card, like remember how Nvidia tried to claim that a 3090 was an 8K graphics card, and then it backfired on them tremendously, and then they had to go, like when the 4090 came out, they were like, oh, it's a 4K graphics card. So they kind of like backed down from the claim of 8K. And then it's like Sony was trying to do, oh, the PlayStation 5 Pro is a 8K game machine. Now they're saying it's a 4K. Well, I was saying it's 120 4K. So realistically, if I hear someone telling me that their graphics card is an 8K graphics card, what that really means is it's a 4K graphics card. When someone says that it's a 120 FPS 4K machine, what that really means is that it is a up to 60 FPS 4K machine. That's what that really means. See, you have to correct the expectation. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. And also the company themselves, the marketing team is setting themselves up for disappointment from the mass media. So, and I guess the actual end users. But anyway, yeah, this is definitely not a 120 FPS machine. Do you know why? Because we already know that where is it? No, it's not. It's none of these. Like what? Where is that graphics card? What am I looking for here? Okay. This is basically what the PlayStation 5 Pro is going to be using. But remember, the PlayStation 5 Pro is going to be power limited. It's not going to be able to run at the same kind of power limit as a full 7800 XT. So what does that mean? That means that the true performance of the PS5 Pro is actually going to be more like a 7700 XT. That's what it actually means. Case in point, the PlayStation 4 Pro was supposed to be like a hardware-wise, it was kind of like an RX 480. But realistically, in practice, it performed like an RX 470. So, same thing is going to happen here. They're going to release a PS5 Pro with a 7800 XT level GPU, meaning like a 60 compute die, and realistic performance is going to be like a 7700 XT. So, I kind of expect it to fall into this range, which means If you're looking at Nvidia graphics cards, it's going to be kind of like a 3070 Ti in terms of performance. And I guess an older AMD card, the RX 6800, the non-XT. That is kind of where the PS5 Pro. So that means that it is not a 4K 120 FPS machine, because this is not a 4K 120 FPS graphics card. So that's how you can tell. This is called tempering expectations. So that's pretty much PlayStation 5 Pro in a nutshell. Let's see, what did they say? Do they have any? Okay, it has some AI upscaling. What? The PS5 Pro has AI upscaling? In vein of Nvidia's DLSS that has been in the works for some time, which alongside the improved specs of the base model will allow Sony to... So does this mean that this thing is RDNA 4? Hold on a second. If PS5 Pro has AI upscaling, that means that it has to be like an RDNA 4 / RDNA 5 implementation, because RDNA 3 doesn't have AI upscaling. It's not in the hardware, so that's interesting. So much heat will build up and it might go down below. I don't know about that, Nero. I no. If it's overbuilt so that it will maintain the tier down below performance. So like if it's built to be a 7800 XT, realistically, because of what you just said, because of like the power limit and the having to keep the temperatures at a certain threshold, it's going to perform like a 7700 XT. But that's pretty much where I expect it to land. How AI upscaling will work on PS5 Pro remains to be seen, but it would likely require some form of work. Yeah, that'll be interesting. It would have to be some kind of RDNA 4 based chip, though, for it to have that. That'll be interesting. I do plan to get one, though. Like, I do plan to get one of these when it comes out, an upgrade from the PlayStation 5 that I have. I'm curious to know how it will improve games like Final Fantasy 16, which in performance mode, Final Fantasy 16 looks terrible. So you kind of have to play it at 30 FPS mode if you want it to look good on the PlayStation. And we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth here in a minute, and I haven't looked at any of the reviews yet, but I think that that game is another one that will probably benefit from the Pro. Sony already has AI upscaling on their TVs. Oh, if it's like that. Is that really AI upscaling, though? Isn't that just spatial or temporal based? Kind of like FSR? RDNA 3.5 was supposed to inherit some features from RDNA 4. Yeah, see, Nero, I kind of think that that's how it's supposed to work. If it really is like DLSS, though, it has to have some kind of silicon. It has to have dedicated silicon for it to actually do these sort of things, like the actual ML for anti-aliasing and for upscaling the image. That would actually require dedicated hardware. You can't just do that in software, as far as I know, unless you somehow are able to get the algorithm running on the CPU section, or somehow utilize the GPU to do that. But then again, well, I don't know. It depends on how the algorithm is designed, because technically you could do DLSS on like a regular shader-based array, like on RDNA 3, for instance. But I don't know if it would work. I don't know if it would be fast enough without the dedicated hardware. That's the thing. The more expensive TVs have a dedicated chip for the upscaling. Okay, so see, there's some kind of hardware solution. Okay, well then if Sony has that, then they could do the coprocessor approach. I just don't see how that will be financially feasible. Because how much do those TVs cost? See, the thing is, those Sony TVs, aren't those TVs like $1,000 or something? The PlayStation 5 is like a $500 machine. $400 machine if you have the one that has no Blu-ray drive. So if you're gonna, unless the Pro is going to sell for like $600, $700, I don't see how it's gonna have that without it fitting in a specific bill of material. Flavored mold says it uses FSR. Are you sure? We're not talking about the PlayStation 5. We're talking about the PS5 Pro. Because this article claims that it will feature AI upscaling. FSR is not AI upscaling. It's temporal upscaling. Or spatial upscaling, depending on which version. Anyway. So that's the PlayStation articles. I'm actually more interested in this, the VR2 support on PC, because I already have this VR headset. So for me, I just want it to work on PC, and I'll be happy. That's all I need. Okay, moving on. Intel had a thing, I think earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken. There was an Intel event. I forgot what it was called. Well, Intel did something where Pat Gelsinger got on stage, and according to this article, Pat Gelsinger hopes to make chips for AMD as Chipzilla kickstarts its custom chip business with Intel Foundry. Oh, that's right. It was Intel Foundry Day. It was Intel Foundry Day this week. That's right. It was not about the chip design stuff. It was all about the Foundry. Because remember, they're trying to stay afloat, and they need more customers on the Foundry, because the Foundry, it gets more and more expensive, and if they're not able to get more usage out of it, it's very hard for Intel to justify the expense required to keep advancing the node. Conspiracy moment where Intel wants to start making chips for AMD to get their designs. The thing is TSMC. If you think about it, TSMC already sees all the designs of all their different customers. So wouldn't TSMC be able to do the same thing with like all of them, including Intel's GPUs? So maybe they just want AMD's chips so they can improve the chiplet design for their own stuff. I don't know, because apparently Meteor Lake was a dud when it came to the chiplet style. There's like performance regressions or something like that. That's what I remember, and that's the reason why it's so low volume. You never hear anyone talk about it. Okay. They revealed the firm's intention to enter the custom chip. They want to go into custom chip. See, the thing is, Intel is so big already. And it's not like they don't do custom things. Intel has an entire networking division. They produce a lot of network interface cards. They have their own SSDs. They've got a lot of things that are not just like CPUs. So it's not like they don't do custom, but the thing is, I guess they don't do custom in the way that it's more profitable, I guess, compared to what Nvidia and AMD are doing. So maybe that's the difference. TSMC is kind of an external party compared to Intel, which is an actual competitor. Yeah, well, I guess, but Intel has it's like two separate entities. You have the Foundry, Intel Foundry, and then you have the actual design business, the chip design. Intel decides to ring the bells in the semiconductor markets, plans on becoming the world's leading foundry by 2030. CEO hopeful that they will make chips for AMD too. Where does he say that though? Well, if you go back to the picture I showed today, there are Intel products and Intel Foundry. There's a clean line between those. And as I said on the last earnings call, we'll have a setup separate legal. We'll have a setup separate. I guess he meant to say we have set up a separate legal entity for Intel Foundry this year. We'll start posting separate financials associated with that going forward, and the Foundry's team objective is simple: fill the fabs, deliver to the broadest set of customers on the planet. We hope that includes Jensen, Cristiano, and Sundar. And you heard today it includes Satya, and I even hope that includes Lisa going forward. I mean, we want to be the foundry for the world, and we're going to be the Western foundry at scale. We can't be discriminating about who's participating in that. Okay, so that basically means all of them. That basically means they're going for all of them. It's not just AMD. But it's funny because AMD is the one that directly competes with them in the CPU space. But the thing is, guys, you have to remember, though, I feel like hardware enthusiasts take things to, like, hardware enthusiasts fail to see the big picture oftentimes. So, what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people are like, oh, well, AMD is dominating in CPU. Actually, it's not. The reality is AMD is not dominating in the CPU space the way a lot of enthusiasts think they are. Because Intel, if that were the case, why is it that Intel is still like more than 2/3 of the CPU market? Has anybody ever thought about that? And the other thing, too, is when you look at the enterprise market. Now, actually, it's the enterprise market where Intel has lost a lot more momentum than expected because of EPYC. However, what I've noticed in the enterprise market is that even though EPYC is a superior product to Intel's current Xeons, what I have found is that the partner companies that package these processors into servers and other sort of devices, like network devices, they're still largely just default. They keep defaulting to using Intel Xeon, even though Intel Xeon is not the best choice for a lot of these different applications, which I find just kind of mind-boggling. Like, I'll give you guys an example. So, everybody's aware of Nvidia's dominance in the AI space, the AI accelerators, you know? Everybody knows about that. However, when you look at the sort of products that these companies like Dell, HP, Lenovo, Cisco, all these enterprise built, like the people who build the big servers, like the really, really big servers with all the hard drives and all the SSDs, like they're still putting Intel Xeon. They're pairing up the Nvidia accelerators with Intel Xeons. And I'm like, why are they going with the Intel Xeon? Because that thing uses more electricity. And the other thing too, the biggest complaint that I'm hearing from industry analysts as well as the people who actually run the data centers, not the people who build the servers. I'm talking about the people who actually maintain and run the server infrastructure, whether that mean that they rent out rack space and electricity and internet connectivity for the people who have the servers, or they're just like an upstream transport provider. The biggest complaint that I'm hearing is that the problem is the electrical, and this is not the first time I've said this. I've said this in a previous stream. The biggest problem is the electrical grid is being stressed too much by all these AI accelerators. So I keep thinking, like, why aren't these people dense packing the servers with the highest core count part? In this case, like an EPYC Bergamo or a Genoa, you know, like a 96 core EPYC or a 128 core EPYC. Why aren't they putting those things together with NVIDIA's AI accelerator? Why are they putting like a PowerHog Xeon with this and then have the provider, the rack space company, complain to them that they can't give them enough DC or AC power drops because they're over subscribing on the power budget? You know what I mean? Like, what is going on here? Clearly, there is a lack of education, I'll say. I'll put it nicely. there's a lack of education on the people who want to build these servers that house all these Nvidia AI accelerators and I guess MI300s. But those typically get bundled with the Epic stuff. It's like they need to start bundling the Nvidia stuff more with the more energy efficient processor to kind of minimize and downplay this strain on the electrical grid, because that's the biggest complaint that I'm seeing. And it's only going to become a problem as we see more increases in like generational uplifts in performance, because as you hit the reticle limit, as it becomes harder to go down to a smaller node, and even if you can go down to a smaller node, you're still keeping the same power envelope, or in a lot of cases you're going up in the power consumption instead of down. So it's like it's kind of not making any sense in the sense that you're making a better, faster processor, but it's also consuming the same or more electricity. So it's like, technically, if you do the math, the perf per watt is better, but it's like not as good as the previous generation was over the previous generation, if that makes any sense. So yeah, Intel recognizes, but basically what I'm saying here is Intel recognizes that their designs for their chips are not the ideal, and they're not scaling with power budget the way they should be. So they're trying to get more revenue through other means. In this case, sell out your fab capacity to your competitors, because if they're building chips that are more energy efficient than your chips, and the market is slowly moving in that direction out of necessity, doesn't matter how strong your brand is, if your processor uses 350 watts and the competition uses 200 watts and you need like 20,000 processors, you can do the math and figure out how much electricity savings it's going to be going with the competitor. So this is the problem that Intel's running into. So that's the reason why they're like, okay, well, you know what, we'll just build Nvidia and AMD and Qualcomm stuff, and I guess Google and Microsoft and Amazon stuff on our in our Foundry, because that's what people are going to end up buying anyway. So we might as well. It's one of those, if you can't beat them, join them things. That's essentially what they're doing. Did you ever manage to find a Sapphire? No, I never found one. Yeah, I know. It's that's the thing. It's like you can never find one. I'm sure you could get one as well. I don't even know. I guess you would have to look on like one of the enterprise hyperscalers websites and see if they partner with someone to get. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Intel has been bargain bin selling lower end data center server hardware through their partners for a while. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Nero. That is exactly how they have maintained the status quo for so long. It's crazy. Because it's like, and the thing is, well, I'm not even talking about bargain bin, though. Like, I'm talking about new products. Like, what's an example of one? Like, Dell, what is it? Dell EMC server with Nvidia AI or something? Like, Nvidia AI. Check this out. AI solutions offering powerful performance with Dell Technologies and Nvidia. AI is making an impact. Okay, yeah, all this stuff. Where is the actual product? I don't even know where it is. Products, servers. Intel innovation, built in Intel. Rack servers. All right, this is what I'm looking for, but where's the one with the AMD? I mean, not AMD. Where's the one with the Nvidia, like, AI stuff? They've got 33 different Intel processors and 8 AMD processors. What are the AMD processors? So they've got Zen 3. They've got Zen 3 for $3,000. Power Edge, AMD Epic. This is, what is this? This is, I don't even know what this is. 9120. This is Zen 4? Zen, is it Zen 4? Yeah, that's okay. The last number is Zen 4. So Zen 4, Zen 4. Okay, so they've got modern ones. Where is, what about Cisco UCS M7 with Nvidia? Let's see. All right, let's see. Let's check this out. Cisco and Nvidia to help enterprises quickly and easily deploy and manage secure AI infrastructure. Cisco Live. Cisco and Nvidia today announced plans to deliver AI infrastructure solutions, blah, blah, blah. Okay, see, the problem with this is, and I might be wrong, they might actually have the EPYC processors, but I remember seeing somewhere that the all the validated designs for, like, if you wanted to build a server with the Nvidia AI accelerators, and you didn't want to use the Grace Hopper, you wanted just like the GPUs, all the vendors, meaning Cisco, Dell, HP, all of their CPUs that they were combining with the Nvidia GPUs, they were all the lame Intel Xeon garbage. And I'm like, where is the actual good stuff? Like, is Supermicro the only one who actually understands? Or is Supermicro another one who just keeps lapping on those old Xeons with those, like basically kneecap all those NVIDIA GPUs by sticking all those ancient Xeons that are based off of Rocket Lake or something? You know what I'm saying? Like, this is the sort of garbage, like, it's no wonder to me why these American companies, I guess, well, I say American companies, what I mean is like Dell, HP, they're multinational companies. But if you compare them to Gigabyte, Asus, ASRock, MSI, like the Taiwanese companies, which people call the white label switch and router and server companies, because they're selling like way cheaper and it's like not fully supported configurations most of the time, if that makes any sense, because those Taiwanese companies, they don't have the same level of support that the big multinationals like Cisco and Dell offer. So it's like, the thing is, think about it like this. Like, let's say you're an AI startup. Let's say you're an AI startup company. So would you rather buy a Gigabyte enterprise, like an enterprise server, professional enterprise server from Gigabyte, which gives you like AMD EPYC plus the Nvidia A6000 Ada, whatever? Or would you buy it from like Cisco or Dell? But the only difference is the Cisco and Dell one will give you an Intel processor, whereas the Gigabyte one will give you whatever the latest and greatest EPYC processor is. See, the problem is, most of the time, and I'm thinking from my own experience, like if I have to choose between like El Cheapo Gigabyte with AMD EPYC plus Nvidia. Now keep in mind, the Nvidia hardware is the same. Doesn't matter if you're buying the Nvidia through Gigabyte or if you're buying the Nvidia through like Dell or one of those big boys. Like, do I want to go cheapo mode with Gigabyte with a white label server, or do I want to buy an enterprise server from Dell EMC or HP Enterprise, HPE, or do I want to go with Cisco UCS? Like, do I want the professional big boy pro league stuff, but it's going to force me into an Intel Xeon that runs a mini nuclear reactor and requires liquid cooling? Or like 8,000 RPM air fans that are going to give people hearing loss if they're in the data center all the time. Like, am I going to have to go with that, or am I going to have to go with, Cheapy D over here from Taiwan with their little rinky-dink server chassis that looks like it was made by Fractal Design or something, like pick something up from like Puget Labs. You know what I'm talking about? So it's like, who am I going to go with? Like if I'm someone who has to make the buying decision, oftentimes I'm going to go with the long-established big boy pro league, HP, Dell, or Cisco. It's going to be one of those guys. Or Supermicro. There's kind of in there too, sort of. So, yeah. Supermicro's a lot more. Yeah, Supermicro though, the thing is like they're more like Gigabyte and Asus, honestly. They're like one step above Asus, Gigabyte, MSI. Well, I don't even know if MSI is in enterprise, but what I know is like, okay, here's the thing. If you're building an enterprise data center, and you're not gonna go with the big boys, and when I say big boys, I'm talking about like Cisco, at Dell, and I'm not talking about regular Dell. See, people are thinking, oh, Dell, dude, you're getting a Dell. No, I'm talking about actual EMC. I'm talking about the big boy. Not little rinky-dink Dell selling you little gaming laptop Alienware trash. No, I'm not talking about that garbage. I'm talking about the real deal EMC, the enterprise class. You know what I'm saying? That's the real deal. None of this little toy rinky-dink stuff for 12-year-olds called Alienware. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the really big guns. So, HP Enterprise, HPE, that's another example. That's Hewlett Packard's brand. You know, we're not talking about regular little Toyotas. We're talking about Lexus class. We're talking about like the high class. You know, we're like, this is like beyond Threadripper. Everyone's like, oh, Threadripper is too expensive. Well, you know what? I'm sorry. There's stuff that's even more expensive. So we're talking about the real stuff. The stuff that you have, like if you actually want to buy one of these things, you can't just go and buy one like just on a whim. No, you have to go and talk to an actual sales team. You can't go in and be like, hey, I want to buy, where can I add to cart and do a checkout? No, that's not how it works. You know what I'm talking about? We're talking real stuff. So if you're building a data center and it's going to be AI based, which means you need Nvidia GPUs typically, because you're probably going to be leveraging CUDA, you're probably going to be buying from one of the established big names. And these big names, these guys are the ones who I feel are really out of touch with the times. Because every time I look at their product offerings, it's always the same old stuff. It's like, what are they doing to innovate in the data center? You know, like we see that in the PC space. We see it in the enthusiast world, but you don't really see it happening that much. It happens at a much slower pace. So, anyway, I don't even know where I was going with that. I guess the original thing was about Intel's Foundry. Yeah, it was all about Intel wanting to make chips for AMD. I mean, this is a clickbait title. They really just want to make chips for more revenue. That's really all it is. So, because they recognize that their chips are no longer the leading edge, I guess, because it's just too far behind TSMC. So they're like, oh, you know what? Let's see if these guys want to build their stuff on our things. And they could do that, but the question is, like, the thing is, if I'm AMD, if I'm Jensen Huang at Nvidia or Lisa Su at AMD, I would scrutinize how good would the products turn out if they were built on Intel's Foundry versus TSMC. So realistically, it's more about like how well. At the end of the day, this still boils down to how competitive is Intel against TSMC. Because if they're not competitive with TSMC, then why would those guys go to them unless it's for like half-step nodes? Or, you know, like for instance, Zen 4.5 or Zen 5. Like a half node. You know, like the ones that people buy for mobile. Like the 8700G. Like could Intel's Foundry build the 8700G and not impact the performance in any noticeable way? You know, that's kind of what I would question. Because I doubt they would go to Intel for like their bleeding edge processors. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually would. Maybe they would evaluate how well it does built off of the Intel Foundry versus the TSMC one. And this applies not only to AMD, this applies to all of them. AMD could probably fab the I/O die at Intel. Yeah, possibly. I mean, for a while they were doing it, Global Foundries was doing it for them. If I remember correctly, Zen 2 So aka Ryzen 3000 was the CCDs were made by TSMC, but the IO die was still made by Global Foundry. So they could I think TSMC does all of it now for them. But yeah, they could do something like that. It depends, but I really think I think the IO die is still going to need to be on a bleeding edge technology, because when you think about it, where is the bottleneck on Ryzen today? The bottleneck is the IO die. Because remember, the fabric F clock is actually on the IO die, not the CCDs. So if they put it, if that's the bottleneck, then why would, and if Intel's not that good, then why would they, you know what I'm saying? Like, why would they do that? Who has worse nodes, Intel or Samsung? Samsung. Samsung is behind Intel. If Samsung was ahead of Intel, then the ARM processors that they manufacture in the smartphone, in the mobile market, assuming they still do, then they would be significantly better. So, who makes the, like, is it all TSMC? What does Samsung's nodes make besides the processors that go in TVs and automotive stuff? Does anybody even know? Like, besides Internet of Things sort of devices, like, what does Samsung's nodes, like, what are the processors that come out of Samsung's nodes? Does Samsung still make Exynos? Is Exynos still a thing, or did they give up on that? It's all Qualcomm now. They overpromised their 8 to Nvidia and could not deliver. No, they could. They delivered. Samsung should mostly be RAM. Do they still make Exynos? They make the Tesla autopilot. That's what I'm saying. Like, Samsung stuff is what I consider IoT, meaning Internet of Things. So, you know, like when you buy a washing machine or a dryer that has Wi-Fi in it, it probably has a Samsung chip in there. Or a refrigerator. Like a refrigerator that can connect to the internet, that probably has a Samsung chip in there. Exynos is still used. See, I didn't know that Exynos was still... Okay. Yeah, I didn't even think it was still around. Like 10 years ago, it was still good. It was good. I mean, I don't know how it is now, but mark my words, Samsung will be the next Nintendo Switch. Really? Oh, that's a bold claim. I mean, it could be. Actually, hold on a second. Now that I think about it, you might be right, because it's going to be Ampere based. So yeah, I'm pretty sure you're right. They still make high-end Exynos. A54 5G Exynos A55 is speculated to use and improve Exynos with RDNA 2. Didn't they scrap that though? I heard that got canceled or something. AMD, okay, now this is a quick one. AMD CEO Lisa Su to host opening keynote of Computex 2024 on June 3rd. Next gen Ryzen CPUs and more expected. See, so like I said at the very beginning of the stream, things right now are kind of boring. There's not a lot to talk about in the tech space. It's all pretty much status quo. It's all mostly gaming related news now. There's not a lot to talk about in terms of hardware. We're just kind of waiting around now until June to hear about the next stuff. Basically, the second half of the year is where all the exciting new products are going to be, you know, they're going to be at. Like, that's where all the action's at. Like, this first half is really, really boring. There's not a lot to talk about. And, you know, if you look at other YouTubers, like, they're just doing, like, CPU cooler videos, and maybe some cases are being reviewed right now. I don't know. It's pretty boring. I'm not gonna lie. There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing that interesting happening right now. The latest high-end chip has RDNA 3 based GPU. Oh, the Exynos. So yeah, I would expect... Remember, guys, when I said at the beginning... Remember what I said, like, weeks ago? The first... I said And I've been saying this for more than like one live stream. Next gen Ryzen, aka Zen 5, I estimate that it will release around July. Sometime in July is what I said originally. So we'll see how accurate I end up being. Because remember, I don't have any insider knowledge or any leaks or anything like that. So I'm just guessing. I'm literally just making an educated guess based off of how products previously launched in like 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, etc. So based off of that, I would expect the summer. It doesn't have to be July, but August. Basically, it has to be in the summer, like sometime in Q3. So July, August, September. That would any time in those 3 months is when I would expect Zen 5. If Zen 5 uses the same I/O die as Zen 4, it's not going to be the same I/O die because we already know that the 8700G uses a different I/O die. So that's definitely going to be different. Let's see. Okay, we already know what Computex is. It will take place from June 4th to the 7th. It's always the beginning of June. Sometimes it's at the very end of May. But when I say the very end of May, I mean like May 31st. So at Taipei Exhibition Center, Halls 1 and 2, connecting. Oh, look. The theme of this year's Computex is connecting AI. Oh, what a buzzword. Everybody's talking about AI. This year's exhibition focuses on... I mean, this is literally what the only thing that tech companies, all they talk about now is AI. Like, if you're not talking about AI, you're not... It's like, if you don't mention AI and you're a tech company, you're instantly not cool. Like, you're not cool. Like, there's something wrong with you. You don't know what you're doing. Like, if you're not talking about AI, no one's going to pay attention to you, apparently. Like, if they're saying, okay, connecting AI, like if you don't have some kind of AI product in the works that you can market and talk about, then everyone's just going to ignore you. So, like, everyone, this is the reason why, guys, this is the reason why. This is the reason why this is happening. This is the reason why this is happening. Because if you don't talk about AI and you're a tech company, you're not cool. And if you're not cool, you're going to go bankrupt. That's how it works. But if you're the arms dealer and you are basically making the weapons of AI, in this case, Nvidia is the arms dealer, look at what happens to your company's value. You literally become so valuable overnight that it doesn't make any sense at all. And everybody buys into the hype, and the investors buy into the hype, and this is what happens. And you can buy way, way more leather jackets. In fact, you could buy so many leather jackets, you could probably give every citizen of a small island nation country a leather jacket as a gift. So that is impressive. Nvidia adds record $277 billion in stock market value. Nvidia's stock market value rose $273 billion in one day. In one day. How it rose to AI prominence. Nvidia brings new life to FOMO AI trade, stock market rally. Nvidia. So you know what's funny about this? They actually went down. So like, they went down right before the earnings, and people were like, "Okay, if you have Nvidia stock, you need to sell. You need to sell." So people started selling. People start selling, and then it's like this drop right here that happened on February 20th at the start of the day. It probably happened because too many people kept saying sell Nvidia stock before earnings because they're probably going to underperform. I don't know what the reason was, but somehow this must have tripped like a whole bunch of massive like mega whales who had this all automated to panic sell if it fell below a certain threshold. So it looks like in this case $719. So if it falls below 719, like probably like hundreds of different investors all automatically started selling, all without them doing anything. It's all automated anyway, right? So and that's what caused it to fall down. So the people who sold here, where it's like 680 something, they must be feeling really bad right now, you know, because now then Jensen Huang got on there, he got on the phone and was like, man, I forgot what he said, but he said something like, we forecasted this, we hit this. We said we were going to do that. We did this. Basically, they did better than what they said they were going to do, and which is the complete opposite of what every other tech company said. If you guys have been paying attention to what other tech companies reported in earnings, it's not what Nvidia said. It's like the complete opposite. Like everybody said they were doing bad. So everyone expected Nvidia to also do bad, which is why this happened. Then Jensen gets on the phone. He's like, "No, actually, we did pretty good. We did better than we thought we did." So then, bam, it just goes right back up. So, and what's funny is it just goes right past the previous record. That's what's funny. Like the Nvidia stock is basically the new Tesla stock. Like Nvidia has replaced Tesla as the stock to trade because it's getting kind of ridiculous, to be honest. I would expect the Nvidia stock to start tanking soon. Why? What would be the reason for it to tank? Because the problem is they set a forecast. Your stock's not going to go down if you exceed your forecast. You know what I mean? A stock that high is a very juicy sell. Yeah, you're right. It is, and that's why a lot of people, when it was back here, before earnings, there was a lot of people who sold at that time. But that's what tripped it to go back down, though. GPUs getting banned from China like that. Well, I don't think that has anything to do with this. See, this has nothing to do with the 4090. This is all the Grace Hopper, the servers that I was talking about earlier. They announced some new deal, like Cisco announced some new thing that also made it go way up because they're like, oh, we partnered with them now. Because remember, guys, last year I did one of the discussions that we talked about was the war between Nvidia and everybody else. Remember what I said probably back in like September of last year on a certain live stream? I remember talking about this. I said that there was going to be a war in the industry. And it was going to be Nvidia versus the world. It was literally 1v all. Nvidia versus everyone. And now, what do you think happened? They announced a peace treaty. Cisco was like, hey, you know, you come on over. Don't be like this, Jensen. Don't be a jealous, angry god. We can all be friends. You have your InfiniBand, but the entire world uses Ethernet. Basically, what happened was Nvidia is Attila the Hun in this war. And Cisco is Pope Leo I in the Vatican. So Nvidia went and visited Cisco in the Vatican and was like, we want to win, but it's like, why aren't you guys surrendering? Well, you know what? So Cisco was like, hey, hold on a second. How do you think the world is going to surrender when the entire world is already using Ethernet? Why would the whole world bow down to you with your leather jacket and surrender Ethernet over to InfiniBand? And Nvidia was like, okay, yeah, you got a point there. So basically, the big war ended. There's no more war. There's no more war. So as a result, this is happening now. This is happening now. See, so the thing is, you guys who are thinking about the 4090 and stuff, you're missing the big picture. It goes way outside of that. Like, the 4090 being banned in China is like a little anthill on the sidewalk. Meanwhile, you zoom out Nvidia, Cisco, and all the big players here, like Dell, all the big networking companies, Juniper, Arista, you have all these big boys that are sitting here like with their arms crossed, like they're a bunch of Ginyu Force members. Meanwhile, Nvidia's basically Gohan and Krillin. It's like, you really think you're gonna win against Raccoon? Like, sorry, I don't care how much money you got, you're not gonna win. So you can't take them all on, even if you have like $1 trillion club valuation. It's just not, that's not how it works. The world just doesn't work that way. So Nvidia's like, okay, fine, whatever. So now they announced a partnership. Now they've teamed up. So now you have a combined effort between Nvidia and the networking telecom giants, the god tier companies historically, the ones from the dot-com boom of the early 2000s and the late 90s, that have god tier status basically. They are now basically adopting Nvidia. So now, but Nvidia at the same time is adopting the Ethernet standard. So basically what this is, for those that don't understand what I'm talking about, think of it like G-Sync versus FreeSync. And in this case, Nvidia is G-Sync. In this case, Cisco and everybody else is FreeSync. Who do you think won the G-Sync versus FreeSync war years ago? Obviously, FreeSync won. Because why? It had mass market adoption. What do we have in the network world? We have Ethernet. Everybody watching the stream has probably heard of the word Ethernet. They probably know what Ethernet is, even if they don't actually know how it works. But if I ask people in the chat, explain to me how InfiniBand works, I don't even think everybody in the chat even knows what I'm talking about. This is the reason why Nvidia actually waved the white flag here and kind of gave up. But again, it was all strategic. It's strategic. Jensen is surrendering on purpose because he knows he is not a fool. He can see the bigger picture. He can zoom out. He's not looking at that anthill on the sidewalk, which is a 4090 band in China. He's looking at the bigger picture, which is basically what we're talking about here. So anyway, now that this is going through, I don't think Nvidia stock is going to tank anytime soon because of this kind of stuff. These kind of partnerships are what is behind driving this stock up, because Nvidia is rapidly changing its trajectory. They are basically mutating into a different entity altogether, and it's happening very quickly. In the course of 3 years, they're transforming. They're pretty much like Frieza transforming into his final form. So they're in that process right now. Basically when the 4090 launched, that was like Nvidia, that was like Frieza transforming into Form 2. So Nvidia is kind of like going into Form 3 right now. So when they go to final form, who knows what's going to happen. So yeah, there's a reason why this is happening. Just wanted to point that out. Okay, so we covered this, the AMD thing. All right, let's talk about one more tech-related thing here. So this one is SK Hynix has revealed that the HBM supply is sold out for 2024. Company expects significant growth in 2025. So I don't know what that means. So, okay, see, this is the kind of thing that I would be concerned about. If I was an investor in Nvidia's stock, this sort of headline is scary. Not the 4090 band. No, this is scary. Why? Because all of Nvidia's, all those AI accelerator chips, the really big ones that are like a full server size device, those use HBM. And if HBM is sold out, you can only imagine what that means. Assuming you can't get any from, well, if Hynix is sold out, that means Samsung's the only other supplier. And if they're sold out, you know what that means? If you buy a server, if you buy a Grace Hopper now, you're not getting one until 2025. Like if you purchase one literally right now, you're probably not going to get it until next year. So you'll be sitting around twiddling your thumbs with nothing to do because you can't use the hardware. Yeah, they do. They make HBM. In fact, the Vega 64 had HBM2. My Vega 64 had Samsung-based HBM. The R9 Fury, I forget. I think, yeah, I know that both of them make HBM. So, I don't know. Okay, are they specifically talking about HBM3? Well, see, here's the thing. It's going to start talking about AI again. See, we're all pretty well aware of the fact that the AI segment, again, it has to do with AI. AI segment has taken the HBM industry by storm, where we have witnessed a tremendous rise. See, the thing is, the naysayers who keep saying that AI is not going to be a thing and it's a trend and it's not going to last. Making statements like that without doing any research clearly shows a lack of understanding of what is actually going on behind the scenes and what the actual tech companies are doing. That's what that sounds like to me. Mainly since HBM is used as a crucial component in the development of highly demanding AI accelerators. Firms such as SK Hynix and Samsung have decided to capitalize the most. See, SK Hynix and Samsung have decided to capitalize the most on this colossal demand. Okay, that's one way to put it. Colossal demand, because this certainly tops like the crypto stuff that we saw like a couple years ago, which is actually starting to come back in a different form by upscaling existing facilities. Blah blah blah. Okay, so basically there isn't any from Samsung for the rest of the year. It's like they're fully booked. It's like they can't take any more orders for this year. Any order that comes in now will only be fulfilled next year, is what this is saying. Yeah, so there's not a whole lot more to say. With firms such as Nvidia and AMD preparing for next-gen solutions. Yeah, the other thing, too, is the next gen is coming. So I don't know what that means, like, in terms of if someone wanted to order accelerator chassis servers and they can't get them, like, what will happen there, you know? I guess Samsung's the only game in town, then. Okay. Let's see. Okay, there's a review on this. I do want to talk about this, but not so much in the review. I don't want to look at the review. Let's look at this article. So, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, performance mode, very grainy with FPS dips, quality mode, best bet. Now, this is not news to me because I played the demo. I'm actually surprised that the reviews for this game are already out because this game doesn't come out for another week. So I don't understand why the reviews are so early. But anyway, the Digital Foundry did a thing. I have not watched this yet, but basically, I already know from playing the demo that the FPS mode looks horrible. So you're basically stuck playing it in 30 frames per second mode, I think. Let's see what this says. Okay, it does 60, dropping to around 50 in some frantic battles with lots of NPCs around. Meanwhile, quality mode features slightly more world detail and runs close to a native 4K at most times, although it may drop to as low as 1440p. In some instances, the upscaling issues present in performance mode are not a problem. The game runs at a rock-solid 30 FPS, with at most a single frame. Okay, yeah. And that's kind of how I remember playing the demo. So this is the reason why this is disappointing. Because this already proves that the PlayStation 5 is well past its prime. And it's not good enough anymore. Because Sony insists on touting it as a 4K gaming machine. I really wish that these consoles could run these games at a native 1080p 60 frames per second with full details. I don't understand why they won't do that. They always want to just dynamically upscale to 4K all the time, and it's like, why do they do that? Because it makes the game look terrible if you have to upscale from 720p all the way to 4K for your 60 FPS mode, and it looks bad. So that it's just disappointing. So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I don't understand why it's so hard to make this game run good. Because I don't know what is wrong with Square Enix when it comes to their AAA titles. Because honestly, okay, the graphics of their games, they're good-looking games, but they're not like insanely good, super high-quality imagery that bests the likes of Avatar or Cyberpunk. You know, like these games, the Square Enix games don't look as good as Avatar or Cyberpunk, and yet they're so hard to run on the console at a solid 60 frames per second at like 1440p resolution. So yeah, I don't understand why this is a thing. Because you can, okay, the example I can give you, Tekken 8 on the console runs perfectly solid at 60 frames per second, 4K, and it looks good. It's UE5, and it looks good. There's a lot of other games that run like it. Well, I haven't tested Like a Dragon on console, but Armored Core, I think I played the demo. Some of the games I played the demo version on the PlayStation 5 because you could download the demo a few weeks before the actual release, but then when the game would come out, then I would buy it on PC. But I remember playing the demo on the console and being very disappointed. Like another example of a game I played recently, the Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I played the demo on the PS5 and it looked like trash. You have to run the game in the 30 frames per second mode for it to look good. And it's, it's like, why can't they just let it run at 1080p? That would fix all the issues with the PS5. So, I don't know. This is bizarre. So, because okay, Devil May Cry. Yeah, Devil May Cry 5 arguably looks almost as good. Now, granted, that is a much older game, but it's almost as good as Final Fantasy in terms of how it looks. And it runs at a rock solid 60 frames per second on PS5. Another game that I can think of, Horizon Forbidden West. Horizon Forbidden West looks really good. It might actually look better than Final Fantasy VII, and it runs better than Final Fantasy VII on the console. I don't understand why. I don't understand why that is. So, clearly it's an engine limitation. It really looks like incompetence. The fact that Square Enix went with FSR 1, like FSR 1, on Final Fantasy 16 last year. They didn't go with FSR 2. They went with FSR 1. Why? Nobody knows. That is the $1,000,000 question to Square Enix. Why did you go with FSR 1 on your AAA Final Fantasy 16 game last year? Like, that was the mind-boggling thing that I never understood. Anyway, this might have done the same thing. We'll have to see. I have to watch the Digital Foundry video if they explain it, but we'll see. They probably push more graphics to cover up lack of art direction. Which game? Are you talking about the Horizon game? If the PS5 had to run Cyberpunk Overdrive... Well, we're not even talking about Overdrive, just regular Cyberpunk. The PS5 doesn't even run real... Wait, what? No, Actually, I think, Marcelo, I think you're right. I think Final Fantasy VII is UE4. Yeah, I think you're right. Because, yeah, I think it is UE4. I'm pretty sure Final Fantasy VII Remake, the previous one, that was on PS4, That one was UE4. I think this one is also UE4. So yeah, I would expect. Okay, that means this is probably going to use some kind of. Is TSR available on UE4, or is TSR is Unreal's upscaler? Is that available on UE4, or is that a UE5 technology? That's what I'm wondering. Because if they use, the thing is, TSR actually looks better than DLSS and FSR. Because I've tested all of them, and TSR looks the best. Like TSR looks better than DLAA and FSR3 anti-aliasing. It's the best looking one. I mean, the most recent game that has, I think Digital Foundry did a comparison, was Tekken. Tekken 8 has TSR and DLSS and FSR, and TSR looks the best. Like, it just it looks the best. It's like, you can't really argue. They show it. I mean, I've tested all of them. I agree. TSR is the best one. Unreal Engine 4 only has TA4U or TAAU, which is probably worse or the same as FSR1. Oh, okay. You know what? That's probably what they're using then. TAAU is probably what Final Fantasy VII uses, and that is probably why it says it looked softer, likely due to poor upscaling. That is probably TAAU. So Final Fantasy 16 was not Unreal Engine. Final Fantasy 16 was some newer variant of whatever Forspoken was using or something like that. And that game looked pretty good until you turned on the upscaling. Like, and basically what I mean by that is if you wanted to play Final Fantasy 16 at 60 frames per second, aka performance mode, that turns on FSR1 with dynamic resolution scaling, and that's why it looked awful. It looked blurry. Well, it didn't look super blurry. It just looked like it was low res. Everything in that game in performance mode looked low res. And then Digital Foundry did they zoom in 200%, and they're like, okay, these little circles, this is characteristic of FSR1. That's how they concluded that 16 uses FSR1, and that's because it didn't use Unreal Engine. It's a special Square Enix custom engine, but it uses FSR1. Whereas this Final Fantasy VII uses Unreal Engine 4, which means it has access to the built-in TAAU. And knowing how Japanese developers are, they're always just going to use whatever comes with the thing. They're not going to bother to do their own thing. They're going to be like, oh, it's fully documented. How nice. It's easy. We'll just use this. They're just going to default to that. Not because they're lazy, but because they trust that it came with the engine that they licensed. Therefore, to get the most out of their money, they're going to go ahead and use it. Even though they don't have to. So that's usually how it works. I mean, it's not just them. Like, there's a lot of other game developers that will do the exact same thing. If they have a UE4 or UE5 game. Does UE4 have CPU core limitations? I know UE4 had god-awful compiler shader compiling that happened, like, in-game. Like, not at the start of the game. Hogwarts Legacy is insanely CPU bottlenecked with UE4 since the X3D. I don't really see it being bottlenecked though. Like it's running at 99% all the time. Meanwhile, Sega destroys an existing game with working engine to experiment for their next Sonic game engine. What? They destroy a working engine to experiment the next gen. Oh, they're going with something else? Are they going with U? Please don't go with UE5. I don't like when a bunch of developers all start going with the same engine. Because see, it's interesting. Some developers don't need, like, they'll go with their own engine. Like, okay, what's a really good example? Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth does not use Unreal Engine. They use the Dragon engine, which has been around for a while, and they kept iterating on it. And guess what? That engine, the game looks really good. It runs really well. And if it doesn't run really well because your GPU is not powerful enough at whatever resolution you're playing at, you can always use the upscalers. And Like a Dragon has all the upscalers you would ever want. It has FSR1, it has FSR2, it has FSR3. I don't know why it has all three versions, but it has all three versions of FSR. On top of that, it has DLSS and Intel XeSS. And I think there was like another one in there too. Like I forgot what it was called. There was some acronym in there. It might be like it might be the TAAU or something, but that's a UE4, so I don't think it's the same thing. But yeah. What I don't understand is there's so much emphasis with game engines incorporating upscalers now. The only reason why you use an upscaler is if you're gaming at 4K. If you're not gaming at 4K, you shouldn't have to use any of these things. So that's why it's like there's so much emphasis on upscalers now. Whatever happened to other things, like other post-processing effects, like HBAO, HDAO, VXAO, or something like that? There was like another one, SSAO, or what, screen space? Yeah, SSAO, and MFAA, or you know what I mean? There's like a whole bunch of different anti-aliasing and different depth of field and different ambient occlusion methods. And now it's like when you open up a game's graphics menu, you literally only get like one of those, at most two different ones, and then you have like all these upscalers to choose from now. Unless the game engine is really like just bare minimum, and there's really just nothing, no upscaler, and there's like, you know, like you could choose between TAA or FXAA, and that's pretty much it. You know, like I think Grand Blue Fantasy is like that. It's like, okay, you get like two different options for anti-aliasing, or you can run both of them together. And then there's like no upscalers. It's like, what? You know, like, okay, that's all it shipped with. We can't even disable TAA in some games, which leaves them really blurred depending on the game. Yeah. Yeah, like the PC ports of Final Fantasy 13. The Final Fantasy 13 trilogy, both 13 and 13-2, they have that horrible looking TAA that's just stuck. It's like you can't turn it off unless you download some kind of mod, and then if you download the mod, it usually breaks the game, and it usually like crashes every 30 minutes or so because of the way the game was made, it ties the frame rate, or it ties something in the battle system to the frame rate, and it just shows like how some developers really don't know how to do PC ports, or their game was designed literally to only run on a console properly because they tie game mechanics to the actual frame rate. So if you try to unlock the frame rate, you break the way the game works because somehow it was coded this way. Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, these are the sort of things that, like, I can only imagine a developer that works for, like, Valve or Epic or somebody, if they see this spaghetti code game that, like, ties the battle system to the frame rate. So, because I know Dark Souls 2 had a problem. Like, I remember if you played Dark Souls 2 on PC and you ran the game either with an unlocked frame rate or a 60 FPS cap, your weapon would degrade so fast that you could be in a boss fight, and after like 6 attacks where you like swing at the boss 6 times, your weapon durability would already be at like 5%. And then like your next swing breaks your weapon, and now you deal no damage to the boss, and you're basically gonna die. You know, like stuff like that. Wow. Okay. Good. This is very much good game design right here, guys. Eventually they kind of fixed it, but then they didn't fix it, and then they made it so that if you were playing with an capped frame rate and you went online, they would ban you. So it's like, oh, okay. So anyway, that's yeah. Anyway, Forza is like that. They're capping multiplayer at some yeah, for some people below 60 now. Well, below 60? They would cap it below 60? Why would they cap it below 60? Usually they cap it at 60. Not below 60. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I know, like, Elden Ring. You can't play Elden Ring with an unlocked frame rate, otherwise they ban you. It's, like, capped at 60. So it's like if you want to play Elden Ring with an unlocked FPS, you have to go offline. You can't connect to the server. Because they've got, like, three different... They've got, like, Denuvo, the anti-cheat engine, and some other thing that runs, and the thing checks for the timing of your attacks or some nonsense, and it's like, oh, you're cheating because you're running the game at 120 FPS. And it's not even cheating. It's just because they made the game in such a way where it's like your attacks, the timing, the frames of your attacks are timed to the in-game frame rate. So it's like, this is the reason why I forgot. Someone explained to me one time. The best example I can give you guys is a fighting game. So like, think of Street Fighter and Tekken and Mortal Kombat. All three of those games, they can only run at 60 frames per second. They cannot run above, and they're not supposed to run below. And the reason why they can't do that is because when you issue an attack, like you throw a punch or you throw a kick, there's a specific number of frames associated with that attack that is literally tied to the in-game, the 60 frames per second. So like if your attack is, say, 22 frames, 22 frames, that's not quite half of the 60 count in that 1 second. So it has to match. Like it has to be synchronized. That's why they don't allow running the game above 60. And the problem is if someone's playing the game, typically this is not a problem on console, because now you can imagine if you design a game for console and it's optimized to always run at 60 because the battle system is tied to the frame rate, that's not a problem on console. You just have to optimize as much as possible so that you can ensure that it runs at 60 on the console. Now, that doesn't really work on PC because you might have someone who tries to run the game on a potato from 12 years ago, and they're only going to be getting like sub 30 FPS. So they start throwing an attack. You can start throwing an attack, and if let's say you're only averaging 25 frames per second, but you have a 22 frame attack, like that's almost the entire like window for the frame to go. Like it won't work. So basically what they have to do is they have to take into account something called rollback frames. And not only is that's usually designed to handle lag over the internet, but if the person's computer is the problem, it's not outputting the frame rate fast enough, it's too slow, they have to issue the rollback frames for the hardware, not the network. So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's basically a double whammy of latency. So your opponent would hate playing against you if you were playing the game on a potato. They basically thumbs down and never play you again. That's usually what ends up happening to the people who have terrible computers and they're trying to play like a modern game, a modern competitive game. So you can get banned for that. If you're talking about fluid motion frames, no. Because it's interpolated. So yeah, no. The consoles also have built-in direct storage on the SDK. Yeah. But usually these type of games, they're not super limited by CPU. Like if a game is so dependent on the frame rate to synchronize the actual attacks in the battle system, like a fighting game, for example, fighting games are rarely, if ever, CPU limited. Unless the CPU is very, very old. Like if it's like an old i7 from 2015, like if you're on like an ancient Skylake i5 and you're trying to run the game at 4K with a 4090, that's going to be a problem. True, but even if anti-cheat, no, it wouldn't be able to. It wouldn't be able to because it's the same thing. It's the same reason why like Afterburner and the regular tools for reporting frame rate, they don't show the frame rate. They'll show 60. Like if you're capping at 60 because the game only runs at 60. Like for example, I'll give you guys an example. Okay, I know this is true because I've already done this. Like Tekken, remember Tekken 8? When I played Tekken 8, I turned on fluid. I think it was fluid motion frames. Yeah, it had to have been because I don't think FSR3 was in the game. So I turned on fluid motion frames, and I was getting 120 FPS at 4K. And I was playing online against other people, and I wasn't getting banned. And that's because the game thinks it's still 60 frames per second. It still shows 60 frames per second. If I open Afterburner, Afterburner says the frame rate is 60 frames per second. But if I look at AMD's overlay, it will say 120 frames per second because I like to use the word synthesized frames, or you can also use the word interpolated, and that's actually more accurate. It's an interpolated frame. It's kind of like a frame between a frame. So you have two real frames, and then in between them there's like a fake frame, if you will. And then after this one there's another fake frame. So for every frame, every real frame, you have a fake frame right after it. That's how you double your frame rate. But the game itself doesn't see that. Also, lossless scaling can do interpolation as well. It doesn't drop interpolated frames. Frameception. Yeah. Yeah, what I've noticed is games that are always capped to 60 seem like they're the best ones for turning fluid motion frames on. Because if the game is already able to handle 60, a locked 60 all the time, you just double it to 120 and you don't really notice any sort of negative things like input latency. Because input latency tends to be a problem if your frame rate is constantly varying, because what ends up happening is if you have like a really high frame rate and then it swings really low, like it dips due to some CPU bottleneck, the synthetic frame count doesn't match. It doesn't instantly match the true frames. So you might have like frame interpol, you have like a frame, an iframe, a frame, an iframe, a frame, an iframe. But then if the FPS like spikes way up for like you look at the sky or something, it'll go like real frame, and then like and then real. It'll be kind of like I don't want to say jaggy, but it'll be like jarring. You know what I mean? And then if it dips really low because you go inside a city in Limsa Lominsa or somewhere, and then there's a bunch of other players running around in the city, like an MMO, for example, like WoW, then it will dip really low. So then you'll go like real frame, iframe, R frame, iframe, R frame, and then it goes low. It'll be like R, I frame, R frame, iframe, R, I, R, I, like that. You'll have a lot of like fake frames all at once. And that can be kind of jarring, or that's the sort of thing that can result in where it feels like there's like latency there, or just doesn't feel the way it's supposed to when you're playing the game. So that's the reason why I feel like this sort of frame generation stuff, the best experience is when the frame rate is already locked at a specific number, and then you just double it with frame gen. Like it already kind of has to be. That's why I say like 60. Taking 60 and doubling to 120 is the best, most realistic use case. I guess 120 to 240 is another one. But I don't know. I haven't tested 120 to 240 because I play games at 4K and I don't really have the luxury of running a frame rate at 120 all the time. You know, so that's why for me, it's like 60 to 120 makes the most sense. cap it to 60 in the game engine and then have like fluid motion frames double it up. Frame gen from 120 to 240 feels the same to me. Like it doesn't make a difference. Yeah, and the thing is, when you think about it, it's because you're just interweaving an iframe for every R frame. And because it's already 120 of them in 1 second, now you have 120 R frames plus 120 iframes in the exact same time interval. So your human eye's ability to distinguish the differences it's going to be diminished compared to if you were going from like 60 to 120. Does Radeon Chill work with? Yes, it does. It does work. It does. And actually, you know what I would use Radeon Chill for? I would use Radeon Chill as a frame limiter. If the game doesn't have a built-in frame limiter, you can set the minimum and the maximum in Radeon Chill for that game to be the exact same number. And then turn on fluid motion frames and then it just doubles that number. So that's one way to get it to work with Radeon Chill. Or that's like one use case that I could actually see myself doing. Yeah, well, that's kind of disappointing that this game is blurry when you run it on 60 frames per second mode. But that I was kind of expecting it to be that way after playing Final Fantasy 16. I actually ended up playing pretty much almost all of Final Fantasy 16 in the graphics mode instead of the performance mode because I didn't like how blurry it looked in the latter. You try that with a game you play that doesn't have a frame limiter, didn't work, but maybe that's because the game uses OpenCL. Oh, yeah. I think Radeon Chill only works with DirectX, and it might work with Vulkan, but I really think it's just DirectX. But yeah, I don't think it works on OpenGL. That might be why. I know for a fact, because the game that I have always used Radeon Chill with, and it's not just Radeon Chill, like if I'm using Nvidia, if I'm using an Nvidia GPU, I also go into Nvidia's control panel and I cap the frame rate to a specific number in there as well. And the game I do that for is Final Fantasy 14, because Final Fantasy 14 is an MMO, and you don't need the MMO to be running at a high frame rate, because as soon as you go into a city, you become CPU limited. So it's very jarring seeing the frame rate go from like 100 something all the way down to like, 60. So, and that, it's just kind of, yeah, no. So what I usually do is I always cap it to like 90 or something. And you can use Radeon Chill as a frame rate limiter by setting both the minimum and the maximum to the exact same number. Yeah, if you guys have Baldur's Gate 3, Baldur's Gate 3 is the most recent one that I know of that has Vulkan. It has a Vulkan, you can launch it either Vulkan or DirectX. If you turn it on with Vulkan, I think Radeon Chill will work. No cap? Oh, you mean like tap? Are we talking about the A770? No cap? See, no cap. I forgot I know where that reference is from. I get it. Talking about GPU launcher features. How do you? Oh, okay, yeah, Matt mentioned that earlier. I completely forgot about that. I was gonna come back to it. Where is that? Yeah, there was an article I saw. I do want to talk about that. Jensen believes that every country needs sovereign AI. Jensen Wong believes that every country needs a sovereign AI. Well, we might come back to this one. Let's talk about the Nvidia launcher first. Okay. Nvidia App doesn't need a login. Unlike, does this mean that they're like killing GeForce Experience off or something? I heard that this is nothing more than a Microsoft Store app. Am I completely wrong? Somebody told me that this is a Microsoft Store app. Like you download this from the Microsoft Store and you install it and that's basically it. This doesn't look like... Wait, hold on. What? Wait. Enable the overlay. They went with Alt-Z, which is a weird combination. I don't think I would have used that. I think that's used for some other things. Call of Duty. You heard Nvidia App is going to be both the control panel and GeForce Experience. Well, that's what everybody's saying, but does that mean that GeForce Experience is going away? They're consolidating all their services under their suite. Wait, what are they doing? The last screen is what won our confidence. Hold on. Huh? And convince us that the Nvidia app isn't GeForce Experience with a different name and it's like different. The screen presents you with an incentive. Wait, this screen presents you with an incentive to log into your Nvidia account, but doesn't impose the login. Oh, there's the login right up there in the top right. Okay, so basically now you don't have to use... So is this basically GeForce Experience with no login? What does the login do? What does the login do if you don't need the login anymore? Can someone explain to me what exactly did the login do? Because I haven't used GeForce Experience since like GTX 970. Like, it's been like 8 years. Login is for... Was it always for rewards? Or is it now only for rewards? Because, see, the thing is, AMD, if you got, like... I know this because I bought, like, a bunch of AMD things that gave me free games. Right? I mean, that's how I got The Last of Us. That's how I got Jedi Survivor. That's how I got Forspoken and whatever other game that I got last year. Oh, Avatar. That's how I have all those games. I got all those games because of a bunch of AMD stuff. But the point is, like... You don't need... So when you redeem the game from AMD, you do not do anything with the Radeon graphics control center. Like, you don't use Radeon settings at all to redeem the game. Like, it's done through the web browser. It has nothing to do with the driver at all. So, I don't know what this is... Like, why would you even need the login? So, it sounds like you have to redeem... You have to log in to redeem the game through the actual control center? Is that how it always worked? Can anyone explain to me how, like, if anybody bought a 3070 or what was the game, like Redfall? Redfall was bundled with an Nvidia GPU last year. That big fail game, remember Redfall? That game, you got Redfall for free if you bought a 30, or was it a 4070 Ti? Or something? Like, you got it from something, but how do you actually get the game? Because I wouldn't know because I didn't buy that bundle, and I also don't have GeForce Experience. Track user data, but similar to... Yeah, but what I'm asking is, like, okay, if somebody bought a Nvidia GPU and they got a game that was bundled with the GPU, how do they get the game? I don't know that process. I've never purchased an Nvidia GPU and got a free game. Like, I mean, I bought 4080 Super. I didn't get any game with it. That didn't stop me from getting one. But I mean, I still got the GPU, but I didn't get a game. Every time I bought every AMD thing that I've ever bought, I've always gotten like a free game. So it's weird buying an Nvidia thing and not getting anything else. You go to the redeem page in GeForce Experience. Oh, so it's basically like this thing. So it's basically like this. The retailer provides the code and you redeem it via the app. Oh. Interesting. Okay. So what does this mean? This okay. Does this look like GeForce Experience? Because I haven't used GeForce Experience. I'm not familiar with how the UI looks. So this is basically GeForce Experience with no login? Is that all this is? Can I still use the old control panel if I wanted to use it? This is not the same? So is GeForce Experience going away? The only way for me to know is to attempt to install this. And then see what the options are. Install with GeForce Experience or without GeForce Experience. And see what it looks like. See, the thing is, like, I don't care about all this library, discover this, that. I just want to know where can I go to cap the frame rate? Where can I go to select if it's going to run in performance mode or power savings mode? That's the only thing I want to know. Like, and where do I go to turn on G-Sync compatible, aka FreeSync? Like, where do I go to turn that on in this app? Because none of all this stuff about library and discover, that stuff is complete garbage nonsense. I don't care about that. Where are the things I would actually need to use in the actual control panel, in the GeForce control panel? Like, I assume they're somewhere in here, buried under layers of garbage and what looks like bloatware, like with all this stuff about Discover, Nvidia, whatever. GN did an in-depth overview. Graphics tab. Okay, yeah, okay, it's probably all in there somewhere. Settings tab and graphics tab, probably. I might have to make a video on this, because I made a video last year comparing Intel's control panel and AMD's control panel and Nvidia's control panel, and all the comments kept talking about how Nvidia's control panel looks like Internet Explorer 6 from 1997 or something like, or like early 2000s. Like, I got like so many people commenting how Nvidia's control panel looks like IE6 from 20 years ago, with the complete with the back and forward button. It's like they copy pasted the back and forward button from Internet Explorer. It's only like half the settings from control panel regular. Wait, what? It's missing stuff? It's missing things from control panel? That's useless then. If this doesn't have the things that are in control panel, this is garbage. If it didn't run like IE6, I suspect they'll integrate chat with RTX into... Oh no, it begins. Missing tons of settings? What? Oh, this is a beta thing? Okay. I don't know. I might make a video about it, though. Yeah, I might make a video about it. Because, see, the thing is, I don't know what Gamers Nexus does with the GPU control panel. I mean, I know how I use the control panel. So if I can't do the things that I normally do in the NVIDIA control panel, then it's a straight up fail. Do a 10-minute video on the Discover tab. See, like, that's the sort of thing that would just be like a 30-second rant from me on how that's pointless. It's like, okay, that's not why I go. I don't go into a control panel for a graphics card to look up NVIDIA broadcast. Like, that's not why I would go in there. Why? Because I don't need NVIDIA broadcast. Although to their credit, I probably would try it out just because I've never used any of Nvidia's software things before. I mean, I tested the AMD one. The AMD one worked fine. The only thing is it doesn't have as many layers. Like, you can't add as many things as you can in like XSplit or OBS. So I have to play around with the Nvidia one, I guess, to see how it compares to OBS. I would assume it's probably the same as AMD's. It just doesn't have enough. It doesn't have as many layers and scenes and sources compared to something like OBS. You use DDU and then installed the app. I had to instantly go back to the control panel to set up my monitors. See, okay, yeah, that. So you can't turn on or turn off G-Sync with this. Yeah, this isn't gonna get very good. This is not gonna get a good opinion from me if it's missing stuff like that. I mean, at least, to Nvidia's credit, at least they're doing something. At least they're addressing the criticism. Because what did they do with all the criticism from last year? They gave us the Super 40 series. Because everybody wanted that. Whether or not they thought they did or didn't. Like, the fact that everybody complained about the 40 series and how the 40 series is utter trash, unless it's, like, with the one exception being a, like, almost $2,000 card that's off there in La La Land, you know, off on its own little island, and everyone else is, like, in the regular stuff, and everyone's talking about how the 4080 is garbage because it's too expensive, and the 4070 Ti is trash because it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And the 4070 is dumb because it's not that much better than the previous generation, and it gets beat by an AMD equivalent by quite a noticeable margin, you know, while having less VRAM as well. So, I mean, typical complaints, right, from the public on Nvidia. So what do? They're like, okay, let's fix all of this with Super Series by launching, how should I say this? Launching all the scrap metal that they could scramble to find, including the complete die for the 4080. The actual 8103, the full die, they actually scrambled to get enough of those. But apparently it wasn't enough because those things are constantly sold out. And they shaved $200 off. Oh, but they didn't just shave $200 off and not reduce spending. They also gimped the VRM. They gimped the VRM so that they can justify shaving $200 off. You know what I mean? So they're going to have to nickel and dime on their end to justify cutting the price. Because NVIDIA's never going to cut the price just to cut the price. No, they don't do that. They don't do that. If they're going to cut the price, they're going to take something away from you. So in this case, when it comes to 4080 Super, 4080 Super comes with an inferior VRM to the original 4080. So the 4080, it actually has a better VRM, which means technically the 4080 can overclock better than the Super. And that probably explains why certain 4080s, if they were binned well, and if somebody won Silicon Lottery on 4080s, they would typically actually equal, if not beat, a 4080 Super. You guys don't believe me? Go look at Paul's Hardware. Paul's Hardware, his review, his 4080 was beating his 4080 Super, like, I think 6 out of 10. So, yeah. Canada is not a real place. Does it exist in the metaverse? The 4080 FE can easily clock to around 3 gigahertz to 3.1. It's a real cold place? Wait a minute. So Canada is either a real cold place Or it's in the metaverse because it's not a real place. Huh. I always heard people say that Canada was like the 51st state. That's what I heard. Well, the thing is, Canada, like the thing with Canada, the Canadian people, they speak. Okay, there's two dominant languages in Canada. There's English and then there's French. So like most of Canada uses English, but then you have Quebec where they speak French. And it's not, I mean, okay, it's French, but it's like, if I say French, it's like their version of French. So it's slightly different from the actual French. The French. It's a French, not French. How did this turn into Canada? I don't know how this turned into Canada talk. Some people in the chat were talking about it. I didn't start with Canada. That wasn't me. That wasn't me. Somebody said something about I think maybe I was the one that said something about the metaverse. I don't know. I was going to say something about the metaverse. Then I read some comment about Canada, and then like someone said Canada doesn't exist or something. So I was like, wait a minute. If it doesn't exist and it's virtual, that means it's in the metaverse. Like that's the only logical conclusion. I mean, you can't say that there's such a thing as Canadians if the place doesn't exist, meaning they have to be in the metaverse. Hold on, what? You should see how much people want for a 3090 equals about 1800 to 2000 USD. A 3090 or 3090 Ti. 3090 is bad. Like the memory on the back runs at 110 Celsius. People want 3090s in Canada to keep from freezing. I think the RAM chips on the back are still going to overheat though, even if it is in Canada. You'd have to put it in a place like Antarctica. You can get 3090 for $700. 3090 is actually, so if an AI app can scale using NVLink, there is actually a market for 3090s. So the reality is 3090 and 3090 Ti both feature NVLink. And because of that, technically, you could tie two of them together and get better performance than the 4090. Now, granted, your power consumption is going to be like way, way higher when you have two of them running, especially two 3090 Ti. I wouldn't even dare bother with dual 3090 Ti. Like, that's 450 times 2. No thanks. 900 watts. You found a 3090 for 2,821. Anyone bothered with the chat with RTX? I mean, that's not really why. Is there a reason why we should be worried about it? You guys already know about Copilot, right? You guys know that Copilot from Microsoft is basically Microsoft's version of Chat with RTX, and the other thing is, here's Chat with RTX. AMD's where is it? Ryzen 8040. This. They have it already. There's already AI hardware in the Ryzen laptops. Technically, okay, here's what I heard. Somebody told me that the thing about the new 8040. So, okay, notice how there's something called 4080 and there's something called 8040. So everybody knows what the 4080 is, but I don't think everybody knows what the 8040 is. There's a Ryzen 8040. The Ryzen 8040 is the successor to the Ryzen 7040. I think that's right. 7040 was last year's one. So the 7040, the higher end models already shipped with the AI processor, the NPU. But from what I was told, The manufacturers like Acer, Lenovo, Dell, these guys, they could choose whether or not they wanted the NPU to be enabled or not. Now, fast forward to the 8040. The 8040 always has the AI processor on. In fact, what I was told is you cannot turn it off. Now, whoever said that might be wrong. It might be possible to disable it in the BIOS, just like how when you go into a BIOS, you can turn off hyper-threading. You can turn off specific cores if you don't want them. Like on the Intel, you can turn off the E cores. You can even turn off the P cores. You know, on an AMD processor, you could turn off certain cores if you wanted. You could turn off an entire CCD, you know, that kind of stuff. So I don't understand. I can't see why you wouldn't be able to turn this off in the BIOS. Now, because this is a laptop part, you probably don't have that toggle because laptop BIOSes are pretty bare bones. They don't really give you all the options to do any sort of tweaking in there. So that might be why they said that it's turned on all the time. But the fact that the manufacturer could choose to disable it on the previous generation, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do that here. Steam Deck has an NPU, but Valve has disabled it. There is a researcher from India that turned it on. She was running Stable Diffusion on it, on a Steam Deck. Wow, that's interesting. But see, the thing is, so somebody originally asked about chat with RTX or whatever. That's no different from all this other stuff. Guys, look, like there's already so many of these things. So Ryzen AI for versatile performance and support Acer's AI power. Okay, Acer Purified Voice, Acer Purified View, Acer Live Art. These are all apps from Acer, whether you consider them bloatware or spyware or malware or all of the above or none of the above. They all utilize this NPU in the Ryzen chip. So it's already happening. This is the reason why all this stuff about AI dying off, no, it's not going to die off. There's too much hype. There's too much effort on the developer side. The fact that they're hiring people just to sit on their software dev team to make stuff like Acer Live View or Live Art or Purified View, whatever, you know, whatever. And it's not like they're the only ones doing this. Everyone else is doing the same thing. Asus has theirs. Lenovo has theirs. MSI has theirs. Gigabyte, everybody, etc. Dell, all of them. Alienware. So it's the only thing that I find cool about this is if you look at this, they have Acer Sense with Copilot in Windows with instant access through dedicated keys. So you know what this sounds like to me? Listen to this. Intuitive control and seamless navigation on the AI PCs are made possible thanks to Acer Sense and Copilot with instant access through dedicated keys. Okay, I almost read that wrong. I thought that meant like a keylogger. Like this sounded like it was a keylogger. So, because, you know, Copilot is in Windows. So when you're typing on your keyboard, you know, what is to stop Copilot from remembering whatever you typed? Like, let's say you want to, like, log in to Steam and you have to re-authenticate because you were gone for like a month and you have to put in your password again. Well, you type in your Steam password and Copilot may have, you know, indirectly, oh, that was the password to Steam, you know, like whether Copilot knows it or not. It's pretty easy for the OS to figure that out. So those are some of the privacy concerns. And they're talking about Acer Sense. It works with Copilot through access through dedicated keys. Now, they're talking about like a button on the keyboard. But, you know, like I kind of read this as, well, if you can rebind the button and it's looking for the input, that means it's going to basically read your entire keyboard input. So it's no different from a keylogger at the end of the day. So, yeah, I would be, if somebody is concerned about privacy, This definitely raises some red flags. This definitely raises some red flags. And this is the reason why there's a lot of people that were asking, like, can you turn the NPU off? But guys, like, the problem is not the NPU. It's not the NPU. It's the fact that you have stuff like Copilot running in Windows in the background. It has nothing to do with the hardware. In fact, Copilot already works in the Microsoft Edge browser now, regardless of whether you have one of these new Ryzen 8040s or the older 7040 or any of the older chips. It doesn't matter. The only thing that the Ryzen AI chip does is because it's dedicated hardware for like machine learning type algorithms, it just saves on battery life while completing the task faster. That's all that it does. Acer doesn't scream secure or quality to me. You're on 5700X, no NPU, and Copilot is active on Windows. Oh, you've got Copilot active on Windows? Or you don't have it. No NPU in Copilot is active? So Copilot's not active? I wonder if those people that make custom Windows ISOs can remove. Well, a lot of people are talking about Windows 12, because Windows 12, I think, is supposed to be an update to Windows 11, not an actual, like, free upgrade. I think it's like an actual, like, you know, it's like one of those, like, Windows 22 H2 or H4, whatever. It's one of those type of updates I heard, but I could be wrong. Copilot is already active on Windows 11? Since when? Do you know which update added it? That's what I want to find out. Man, yeah, that's annoying. Matt's still on Windows 10. Yeah, see, the problem for me is I'm literally on Windows 11 right now. Like, I was on Windows 10, but I'm on Windows 11 now. I made the decision back in January to finally, you know, pull the trigger and put all my main machines on Windows 11. So this machine is on Windows 11. The test bench is on Windows 11. Although I do still have my 7800X3D. The 7800X3D is on a Windows 10 machine / Linux. So that one is still on Windows 10. But all the other ones, my Threadripper, my test bench over there, the Stream PC, all three of those are Windows 11. When I updated, the button turned on. What button? Wait, what? What? The button? What's the button? Like, pull the trigger to relinquish your privacy. Yeah. Yeah, so this computer and like the other two computers are all actually 4 computers. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you guys, like this is on Windows 11. This is on Windows 11. This is the PC that I'm streaming on right now, the 7950X, Windows 11. And this 13900K is also on Windows 11. Finally, after years of wasted potential of eCores on Windows 10, it's finally able to use Intel Thread Director with Windows 11. So those 3 are on Windows 11. And Threadripper is also on Windows 11. So that's 4 computers all on Windows 11. So I got lots of Copilot. I've got many Copilots. This stream brought to you by Microsoft. Hey, there's no Microsoft logo anywhere here. Really a juicy target. 4 computers and 4 times the data. Especially since one of them is basically a mini server. Well, technically 2 of them. I run 2 of them kind of like server. Well, yeah. 2 of them are kind of like, well, sort of. They're like home NAS machines. The Intel, the 13900K and the Threadripper, I use those two computers as like kind of like home servers. The computers I use for gaming are the Ryzen, the Zen 4 Ryzen stuff. So the X3D, and I guess this one technically, like if I'm live streaming a game and if I'm on this computer, then it's gonna be on this one. You hear about Intel's $11 deal with Microsoft and wanting to fab? Yeah, we talked about that. You missed that. We went over that entire story earlier. Yeah, we covered that. We actually talked about that for a while. All right, so I think the last thing, is there anything else in here that I'm forgetting? Yeah, so the last one I want to talk about is Jensen Huang believes that every country needs sovereign AI. Like this is okay. So this is actually very interesting. I actually listened to this entire thing. I think it's like 30 minutes long or 40 minutes long, the whole interview. So for those that don't know, in the UAE, I think this was last week. Let me make sure. I don't want to give you guys the wrong info. Yeah, it was last week. This was a week ago. So last week, there was a World Government Summit hosted by the UAE. So this took place in Dubai. And obviously Jensen Huang was invited. That's why you can see him there on the stage. And they basically asked him to give his thoughts on where he sees the world going. What is the impact AI is going to have on like everyday life, on businesses, on individuals, on companies, on governments, hence the name World Government Summit. So yeah, it was a very interesting thing to hear him talk at length about it, because he goes into a lot of, they go into a lot of like political things, and also kind of like, I think one of the questions that came up was, I remember one question that stuck out to me was when he was asked, what is the single, like, what is the thing that, like, if you're a country that's not one of the top 5 GDP countries, what would you do? What would you do if you were a leader of, like, if you were a prime minister or a president or whatever, of a country that's not in the top, I think top 5 or top 10 GDP countries. Basically, if you're like a developing economy, what would you do to modernize the country to basically be able to benefit from AI the way developed countries are? That was one of the things that was asked. It wasn't asked that way, but that was basically what was asked. And he said that the focus would be on infrastructure. He didn't even, and his answer surprised me, because he didn't directly go and say, oh, you just need to buy Nvidia's stuff. That's not what he said at all. He said that if he was the leader of one of those countries, he would put a strong emphasis on investing in infrastructure, the electrical grid, like the healthcare system. So basically the healthcare and the electrical grid, because if you don't have a strong electrical grid and it's not reliable, you can't reliably run all this AI stuff on top of it. So Jensen also said everyone in computer science, coders, programmers are right. Well, no, yeah. What he said was, if he could do it all. Oh, that was another question that was interesting. So they asked him, if you could do it, if you could start over again, if you could do it all again and go back in time, what would you do, or what would you advise somebody today, like a young person today that hasn't figured out exactly what they want to do? Like, what would you recommend they do? Like from a educational standpoint, from a career standpoint. And he basically said that he would go into the medical industry. That's what he said. He would go into either medicine, basically medical industry, because that industry, and I see where he's going with that, because if you guys think about the medical industry and medical science in general compared to your run-of-the-mill technology, like semiconductors, heavy industries, microelectronics, transistors, that sort of thing, the stuff that Nvidia is heavily in, uh, medical lags behind so much. Like the amount of distance between like the bleeding edge in technology in semiconductors versus like medical capability is so great. Like the fact that there's no reliable nano machines that can cure cancer or severe diseases like Alzheimer's and those sort of things. Like the fact that we still don't have reliable medical treatments for these sort of diseases, in his mind, it's kind of mind boggling. And it goes to show how far behind the medical industry is compared to everything else when it comes to looking at technology. So he would go into that because, I mean, that's where, and, you know, like yeah, medical industry is ripe for AI. Yeah, like being able to do, you apply machine learning to looking at radiography, tumor studies, for example, like being able to detect if a tumor is present or not, if it's benign, if it's malignant, like being able to speed up that process, the machine image processing of that kind of thing. That's just one example. AI still puts out garbage code every now and then. Yeah, but I mean that's true of every computer app though. Considering that that's what I'm doing at the moment, from IT networking to medicine via data analytics. So wait, but isn't that's technically still IT though, right? You're just doing data analytics, or I guess how does that work? Like how is that considered medical? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like if somebody was doing data analytics for any adjacent industry, is it really that industry? You still need someone to interpret the. Or I guess you're talking about like you did data analytics for networking, for the networking side, and now it's the medicine side. Personal data people are looking for straight answers just from a high level. Yeah. Yeah, but this was actually pretty good. This one was a really good one. Someone mentioned earlier that yeah, they also spoke with Tucker Carlson. There was some other people on there too. Yeah, about his Putin interview. It depends. I'm going back to school. Oh, okay. Oh, so you're technically doing a career change? Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. How long have you been in the IT networking side, if you don't mind me asking? You can use AI processes to assist in diagnosis for things like X-rays. Yeah, right, Nero, and that's exactly what I was thinking. But there's more. It's more to it than that, because I remember probably this goes back probably 14 years ago or even more. I remember. Do you guys remember when people used to talk about nano machines for medical science? Like, I remember there was talk of like injecting nano machines. This would have been back in like 2010. So that's why I say 14 years ago, because I know it was definitely before Tesla had electric cars on the road. So that's how far back this was. But what I remember was people used to talk about nano machines and how you'd be able to either like eat food, or I guess you would take them like a medicine or something, and they would release into the bloodstream. And the way that the immune system would not attack them instantly is because they were going to be coated with some kind of protein layer or something that would prevent them from instantly being attacked by the immune system. So the nanomachines could exist in the body and they would effectively boost the immune system because they would help the immune system distinguish certain biomarkers that are good and the ones that are not. Basically helping prevent things like cancer and all kinds of degenerative diseases. But that never actually took off. And I found that kind of weird. Like, what happened with the whole thing about nano machines? Because why is there, like, why did that just disappear? They harden in response to physical trauma. What? I don't get the reference. I don't get the reference. The Putin interview was something. The shorts are embarrassing. What? The shorts are embarrassing. Oh, you mean like YouTube shorts? I thought you were saying like Putin was wearing shorts. What? In Russia? That's really cold. Oh, it's 2014. Okay. So you have like what, like about 10 years in industry? Yeah. Yeah, if I could do it all over again too, I might actually consider medical. I don't know what I would do though. That's the thing. I feel like medical, there's always going to be a demand. You never have enough doctors. You never have enough staff, no matter where you are. But also, I think it goes beyond that. I think it's more of, and this is where technology can help improve that industry dramatically and minimize the amount of gap between it and everything else. But I feel like not only is there a lack of people in the medical industry, there's also a lack of good people. Like, I guess not good, I mean effective people in the medical industry. Because you can have like X amount of doctors, but you only have like Y amount of actual good doctors that are really good at their job. So that's the other thing too. It's not only is there a quantity problem, there's also a quality problem with the medical industry. The shorts of those videos of Tucker at the supermarket and the Moscow subway. Oh. It's a low barrier of entry, from my experience. Wait, what? Oh, recent employer sponsoring the career pivot. Oh, okay. That's interesting. Couldn't you say the same about the IT business though? Yeah. But the problem is, the problem with the IT industry is what I'll say is the people, like the effective people in the IT industry don't they don't make that big of a difference compared to, it's not that they don't make a difference, but it's like the amount of impact they have doesn't translate, or it doesn't scale in the same level that someone who's exceptional in the medical industry can, if that makes sense. Like, you could have someone who's like really impactful in IT, but that level of impact won't really be felt by the general public compared to somebody who's very effective in the medical industry. Like, just think about it, right? Like, if somebody found a way to, and they're already doing this. I'll give you guys an example. So, like, data compression over Ethernet is something that has been researched time and time again. And we've already seen stuff like this with I'll give you guys an example. AV1. AV1 video encoding is better image quality at the same bit rate, or better image quality at a reduced file size versus the older way, like AVC encoding. That's one example, right? But the development efforts that made AV1 a reality, like, at the end of the day, how impactful is that? Because there's already alternatives like HEVC, which have existed for longer, but they're locked behind licensing agreements. So it's not that AV1 is a novel thing, but it has a positive impact on the video streaming industry. So over time, a lot of people can benefit from it. but the majority who can benefit from it are the content providers. So, and it's going to take a long time before we see that roll out to the average user. So that's one example of how somebody or some group that developed something has impact on an entire user base. But how, like, what is the net benefit of that? You know, outside of the two things that I just mentioned, smaller file sizes, and or better image quality at the same bit rate. You know what I mean? Like, it's good, but it's like, what is the net impact? Because you have alternatives. Meanwhile, if somebody discovers the cure for Alzheimer's disease, like, the impact there is pretty obvious. You know, like, it's night and day. So, 100% agree. Medical healthcare is more tangible. Yeah, tangible was the word I was looking for. The tangible benefits are more easily observable to the average person. They're more noticeable instantly versus some new innovative thing that happens in technology. Like, another example, Tesla with the whole electric cars. First of all, Tesla wasn't the first to come up with electric cars. I think Chevy did the Chevy Volt as a plug-in first, which was like more than 10 years ago at this point. So there was already electric cars before that. The Nissan Leaf is another example. So electric cars, they can benefit people, I guess, but it's like, what's the actual net benefit? But then there's the whole, then that gets into the whole, like, is it really better for people? Is it really better if it's going to strain the electrical grid more? You're just shifting away from fossil fuels over to the electric grid, which is still going to have to use some form of resource to create that electric energy. So, But that's just another example of how something in technology can change the way things work. Well, if we look further back, you guys can think about, like, horse-drawn carriages. Horse-drawn carriages eventually became cars and trucks and all kinds of different automobiles. So that is a change that happened in the 1900s, because when the 1900s started, people still used horses as transportation. But 100 years later, no one's using horses anymore for transportation. Everyone's using cars. So, in fact, in some cases, like the Honda Insight, you have electrical plugins way back. Like, we're talking like 2000. So, you went from, horse-drawn carriage all the way to a plug-in electric in the course of 100 years. So, no one mentions nor aware of AT&T's latest. Oh no, I know about AT&T. I mean, AT&T has done a lot of, like, voice text to speech. AT&T has been one of the earliest innovators in text to speech sound processing. Yeah, no one really talks about that. GM had an electric car in the 90s. Yes, I forgot what it was called. Geo Prism or something. But I know Honda had the Honda Insight. Horse-drawn carriage to work. The horse-drawn carriage. You know what's cool is I think it's cool if you look at, like, some symbolic languages, because you can see how technology has forced languages to change. And what I mean by that, like, okay, we'll use Chinese as an example. Chinese. Because I think, if I remember correctly, let me see. Hold on, if I do car, what's car in Chinese? Oh, that's not the one I was thinking of. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. I'm thinking of something like place? No. No, I remember something like Chinese is information dense. Well, the thing is, like, the thing about Chinese is Chinese doesn't use. Okay, think about it like this: when a computer was first invented, you have to call it the computer. Like somehow the word computer became a word. You know what I mean? Like before the computer existed, there was no computer, so you would never say computer. Somehow that word came to mean computer, as it is the noun. But if you look at some of these languages, like Chinese, for instance, they use symbols to write to basically give meaning in a written form. But car didn't exist in ancient times when that writing was developed. So it's like, oh, I mean, this is true of a lot of things that developed over a long period of time. But they're able to represent car as a symbol, even though like they don't have to invent a new symbol to mean car. That's what's cool. That's what's interesting to me because it's like modern things that didn't exist in ancient times, like a refrigerator, a car, a computer, like a webcam, a camera, a microphone. Like all these random electronic things. Like how would you express this in a language that uses symbols? Well, you'd have to use something that's adjacent to it. So in this case, the symbol for lightning, the symbol for electricity is expressed. So you could use that symbol plus some other symbol that would, like the two symbols together might mean, computer or something, so that's typically how it works. But through those languages, you can kind of see how, the point I'm trying to make is you can kind of see how modern things that weren't around a long time ago, they're expressed slightly differently because they're so modern. So I find that kind of interesting. It's not always the case. Yes, we talked about that already. We talked about Computex. We talked about how things are going to be kind of boring in terms of hardware releases until the summer. The amount of investment in the grid for the transition isn't that big. It is charging and... Well, the problem isn't even that. The problem is the grid itself is not... I don't know how it is in other countries, but I know in the US, the electrical grid is going to be our biggest bottleneck in terms of allowing the country as a whole to adopt these technologies, namely AI running in big data centers, and the charging stations, if everything's going to go to electric cars, and then self-driving cars on top of that. The problem is electrical grid is not there yet, and I think that's what's going to slow the US down more than anything else. I don't think it's different for other places. I think that other countries have the exact same problem, unless they're a really small country and they don't have a lot of people. That would be the only exception where the grid wouldn't be the problem. The grid in the UK uses massive power spikes from everyone turning on electric kettles for evening. Wow. We did talk about Nvidia's earnings report. We did. We did talk about it. Yeah, you missed all of that. We talked about it. We pretty much covered like all the main things. We even talked about PlayStation VR2 coming to PC. That was like the first thing I talked about. Imagine everyone plugging into the grid at the same time to charge their cars. Yeah, and again, that plus the big data centers is the problem. Yeah, the electric tea kettle thing, I think that's kind of hilarious. That is a hilarious thing. Like, I did not know that. Yeah, I'd have to go back and put timestamps in there. I don't even remember when we talked about some of these things. But that's pretty much it for this stream. Uh, it'll be interesting to see what happens when you think about how much the world has changed since 2000. It's already changed a lot. In 2000, not everybody had cell phones. In 2010, so fast forward 10 years later, not everyone had smartphones. And fast forward another 10 years to 2020, pretty much everybody has smartphones. So you went from like 20 years ago, not everybody had smartphones, or no, not everyone had cell phones, to 10 years later, a lot of people had cell phones, but they were like the flip phone, like they're not a smartphone. Because in 2010, the only smartphones were the iPhone 3, the iPhone 3GS, the iPhone 4 was new, and the HTC Dream or whatever the Nexus 1, the Google G1, and the Verizon Droid X, or the Droid and the Droid X. And I think Samsung had the Galaxy, the original Galaxy, and the HTC Evo 4G, which was actually WiMAX. It was not true 4G. Those were the only smartphones in 2010. So think about how far we have come from the Droid and iPhone 4. And remember iPhone 4 with the antenna gate? HTC Evo 4G had a little kickstand in it. That was back when Sprint was a thing. I said Nexus 1. The Nexus 1, that was the January 2010 phone. I don't know how I remember all these release dates, but somehow I still know the Nexus 1 was January 2010. The Droid with the flip keyboard, the Droid 2 was later that year, I think, or in the fall. And the Droid X was summer of 2010. And I forget when the iPhone 4 came out. I think the iPhone 4 was also like early in that year. And it had the antenna gate problem, remember? You couldn't hold the phone and touch the two antenna ends. I remember that whole thing. HTC fell off hard. HTC Evo 4G was the phone. That was the big phone that had the kickstand. I say big, but that was back when like an iPhone 4 was considered large. And an iPhone 4 by today's standards is minuscule. Yeah, every single phone that I've gotten over the years has gotten larger. There's never been a phone that I've gotten that's newer than the previous phone that was smaller than that phone. Because I went from... So my first phone was some Motorola flip phone thing in the 2000s. And then I got like a Samsung flip phone. And then I got a Droid X from Verizon, or that was Motorola. That was my very first smartphone. That was an Android phone. That was the rival to the iPhone 4, I believe, and the HTC Evo 4G. And then I got the Samsung Galaxy S5. Yeah, the Samsung Galaxy S5. I got that in 2014. And then I got the OnePlus 5. The OnePlus 5. I got that in 2017. And I had that all the way until last year. Last year, I upgraded to a Sony Xperia Mark 1 or Sony Xperia 1 Mark 3. They have the weirdest names. So I currently use a Sony Xperia. But I've only ever used Android smartphones. all the phones I had before Android were non-smartphones. They were dumb phones. They were flip phones. First phone was the Nokia. Like, what is this? The Nokia. Hold on, let me see. Droid X. There it is. This was my very first smartphone. The smartphone was Motorola X, first released in Mexico on November 9th. Yeah, I remember this. This was my very first smartphone. The Nokia. Oh, you had a Nokia brick phone? Nokia 3310? Wait, this? When you said brick, I thought it was the huge thing with the big antenna. This looks like a normal, one of those early phones. Yeah, this thing. Okay, my first. I don't even know what the model number on mine was. Mine was some old Motorola. I don't even know what it was. And I had a Samsung flip phone after that. And then I had the Droid X. So I went from the Droid X, which was a 2010 phone. So I got it in 2010. Yeah, this was the very first smartphone that I had. Then I went to the Samsung Galaxy S5. The S5. Yeah, I had this thing. This was a good phone. A lot of people say this was one of the legendary phones. You know why? This phone was one of the last phones that had a removable battery. I could take the battery out on my Droid X, but this thing had a removable battery. Because after that, they got rid of it. The S6, I don't think the S6 had a removable battery. Yeah, this phone, I had this phone from 2014. What year did it come out? I don't even know. Was it new in that year? Where's the release date? What? Yeah, 2014. Released April 2014. Yeah, I got this phone in 2014. It had a micro SD card slot, and it had a removable battery. Your mom still uses a Galaxy S4, refuses to upgrade. S5 had the battery and was still waterproof. Yeah, I know, right? That was one of the things about this phone. I know, it did. You know what this phone also had? This phone also had it used the gyro thing in it to the gyroscope to figure out your steps. So it would always tell you like how many steps you walked that day. So it had that. It had the heart monitor. Yeah, I used those things. That was really good because I remember when I upgraded from this. So I had that. And I went to OnePlus 5. The OnePlus 5. This is probably my favorite smartphone of all time. This is not waterproof like the Galaxy. But I feel like the dimensions of this phone were near perfect. It was slightly taller than the S5. I think it was the same width as the S5. But it was slightly taller. It was just, this was the best phone I've ever owned. This was such a good phone. In fact, I like this phone more than the phone that I'm currently using. IR blast from the modern phones. 1+1, then 2 and 3. Yeah, I got OnePlus 5. I think I told you guys this story before. I got the OnePlus 5 because the S5, this was in 2017. I got this phone in like November of 2017. So it's funny because I got this phone right when the OnePlus 5T came out. But I didn't go with the 5T because I didn't like that it didn't have the button at the bottom. Because this one still had the button. See? So I went with that. It's a touch capacitive button. It's not a physical, like you can't click it in. Unlike the S5. The S5 had a physical button. OnePlus is a shadow of its former glory these days. The 3T was a legendary phone. Yeah, I think I remember. I knew a lot of people that had 3T. 3T was the predecessor. Yeah, 3T was the predecessor to the 5. But see, the 5 was very similar to the 3T. It still had this button down here, which I like that. The 5, I don't know if the 3 had a removable battery. So this was the first phone that I had that didn't have a removable battery, nor did it have a SD card. I mean, I think it was 128 gigs. I had 128 gigs of storage built in. Yeah, right here. You could get it in 64 or 128. Mine had 128, and it was 6 or 8 gigs. I remember mine had 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. And man, guys, in 2017, 8 gigs of RAM on a smartphone was a lot of RAM. To put things into perspective, I think the Galaxy Note 2 or 4, whichever one was out around the same time, that thing was huge, and that thing only had like 4 or 6 gigs of RAM. So the OnePlus 5 was like probably one of the best phones back in the day. And I had this thing from 2017 all the way until 2023. I literally had this phone for about 5 years. 5 years on a OnePlus 5. And I didn't want to get rid of it either. It was just old at that point. I started noticing it falling behind around that time. But technically I could have just kept using it. The battery is fine. Like even to today, if I were to turn it on, the battery would still have really good battery life. This thing had the rapid charge too. This was like the first phone that I had that had rapid charge. You use a OnePlus 7 Pro. I can justify costs for PC hardware. Can't see myself paying big dollars for a phone. The funny thing is though, like the funny thing is like your phone is more important than, well, I guess it depends on the person, but for the average person, the phone is way more important than a desktop computer. That's the ironic thing. Yeah, everyone has a phone. I want the money values from a good processor and storage. Smartphones can't even use micro SD cards. Oh, yeah, they can. Mine has one. You just got to know which phones to get. I'll tell you. So this is my current phone. Sony Xperia 1 Mark III. This is my current phone. The Sony Xperia. This has a micro SD card reader. This has a 3.5-inch phone or audio jack. So you've got the dual SIM, you got micro SD. Now, granted, I bought it like after it's not new anymore, so I was able to get it for pretty cheap because I bought mine last year, so it was already 2 years old when I got it. It's not the latest and greatest. I could have gotten the newest one, but I didn't want to pay like the full price for the latest and greatest, so I just went with this. So this phone will be 3 years old later this year. But it's still really good. It has all the things that I needed. I needed it to, for example, it had to have a 3.5-inch jack. Like, that was a requirement that none of the modern phones had. And no, I was not going to buy a USB-C adapter for that. So that was a requirement. It had to work with T-Mobile, and this works with T-Mobile. Just plug and play. Just pop the SIM card out of the old OnePlus 5, put it in here. I don't need to do anything. I don't have to talk to T-Mobile. It just works immediately. So, the easiest phone transition I've ever done. So, the other thing too, it's an Xperia 1 III. It has all the antennas. So, for example, if I go out of the country, like if I go to Japan, for instance, I can fly into Japan and the phone will just automatically work. Like I don't have to do anything. I don't have to buy a local SIM card. It'll just roam onto Docomo or roam onto SoftBank because I'm using T-Mobile. I don't have to pay any roaming fees. It just works. Unlimited data. Yeah. So this is what I'm using. The S3. It's funny how low-end phones have the 3.5-inch jack and SD card slot, but high-end phones don't. Well, this is a high-end phone, though. This was Sony's flagship of 2021. So, but Sony's like, what I had to do a lot of research, guys. Like when I was upgrading from my OnePlus 5, I had to do a lot of research to figure out what phone to get. And this phone, it's a flagship phone, and it has all the things like SD card and 3.5-inch. It has all the things like, look at this, 12 gigs of RAM. So I gotta have my upgrades. 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigs of storage. Plus it has the micro SD. I do have a micro SD in mine. I think I have like a 512 gigabyte micro SD or something in there, or maybe it's a 1 terabyte. I don't even remember anymore. But mine does have the micro SD in there. And then yeah, there's also a 3.5-inch audio jack, just like its predecessor. So it's like it has all the stuff. It shoots in 4K. So for those wondering, like, okay, when you guys watch my videos, if the videos feature me showing like a product or something, like if I'm showing a graphics card, and if the video is a 4K video, that video for the YouTube video was filmed using the Xperia 1 III. I literally used the smartphone to make the YouTube video. So, yeah, it has a pretty good camera because it has the Sony Vice lens. It uses like a Sony Vice lens or something. It has the wide angle. You guys would have to go watch the MKB HD. Marcus did a video. He covers like a lot of smartphones. He covered this one. He goes way in depth on like the camera. It's got a lot. It's got like 3 or 4 different lenses or something. Way before like Samsung and Apple were doing all the lenses in theirs. The A55. Wait, is this the A55? I don't even know what this is using, to be honest. Like, yeah, I don't even know what the processor is in here. Sony and Asus are the only companies that still do it, although Asus only does the 3.5-inch. Yeah, there is no phone on the market that has everything I want. What are the things that you need, though? But A55 might be enough to consider close enough. What is A55? You mean an Asus phone? What's the A55? I don't even know what that is. I mean, I looked at the Asus phones. There was something about the Asus phones that made me not go with one. I forgot what it was. Oh, the Galaxy. Galaxy A55. I don't even know what that is. Like I haven't looked at Samsung since the S5. So I don't even know what they have. Samsung yeah, I don't even know where that phone is. It's funny because like the Xperia isn't even like, this is actually a really good phone, but no one really knows about it. I'm surprised. And it's not crazy expensive too, like the other phones from Samsung and Apple. Yeah, I feel like if you're like a phone enthusiast that has to have like what some people would consider legacy features, like a 3.5 jack and a micro SD card reader or expansion slot, it's really just Sony and Asus. I mean, LG used to be right up there with them. Sony pulled the Xperia brand for most countries. It basically only sells in the US, EU, and Japan now. Yeah, that's sad because I mean the same thing happened with the Sony Vaio, like their laptop brand. That's sad. That to me shows that they are slowly receding from the hardware market. Eventually, they're probably not going to make gaming consoles. There won't be a PlayStation 7. There'll probably be a PlayStation 6. I don't know about a PlayStation 7. And they're probably just going to make cameras because like their cameras are really good. I really kind of want like if I'm going to get an actual 4K camera for YouTube and not use my phone anymore, I'd probably get a Sony camera. I thought the brand just kind of died off. I thought it just died. Like they kind of just they really wait. It's Vio. I mean, it still has the Sony name. It still has Sony in the thing. Oh wait, who owns it now? It's still headquartered in Japan. Like, did they sell it off to some other Japanese company? Oh, spinoff from Sony. A long time ago, 2014. Wow. Where did it go? Oh, they just kind of spun it off as its own thing. The relaunched products initially distributed in Japan, then later in Brazil. Vio announced plans to re-enter international, beginning with Brazil and the United States. Then, okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Yeah, I know. They kind of like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Their movie division isn't doing well either. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like Microsoft's playing the long game, and I think Microsoft will just de facto win in the end when it comes to the gaming market. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, stuff like this, going back to the very first story to tie it all together, this is like a good move because this will definitely sell these VR headsets by making this work on PC. So, but that's the sort of thing that they need to do. They need to embrace embrace the entire gaming ecosystem as a whole, which is basically what Microsoft's trying to do. And one of the ways to do it is to make a gaming PC. And I don't know, they need to make their own distro of Linux or something. Or they have to have like a PlayStation Store app, like Epic Games has theirs, and do that. Sony is TV, life insurance, gaming. Well, they're also cameras. They're mostly known for cameras, not just TVs. In fact, I would think that their camera business is far more profitable than their TV business. I didn't know they sell. I think they probably sell life insurance in Japan. I don't think they sell it outside of that. They're a conglomerate. So that means they're the same. They're classified the same as Samsung. So yeah, that means they probably sell like financial securities and stuff because that's what Samsung does. Yeah. See. Okay. Look. Check it out. See. Look. Cameras, computer hardware, consumer electronics, films, music, robots, semiconductors, telecommunications equipment, TV shows, video games. Those are their products. And their services are advertising agency, banking, credit finance, financial services, insurance network. Yeah, see, the thing is, most companies that are really big, like multinational, I would not be surprised if most of these type of companies have like financial services. Because, click the financial group. Which one? Oh, this one? Sony Financial Group. Japanese holding company for financial services. Yeah, because these guys, okay, they sell life and non-life insurances, online banking, credit cards, settlement, nursing care, and venture capital. Yeah, because see, okay, most large multinationals do this because it's a good way to generate revenue streams by doing things that don't require you to sell a concrete, like a tangible product in the traditional sense. So, like venture capital, like these guys can do something like digital alpha funding and that kind of thing, in addition to this other stuff. Because I wouldn't be surprised if they fund some of these startup companies or research entities that create things like, for instance, the Sony PlayStation VR. The PlayStation VR headset, the early days of that might have been through a startup company somewhere that they might have been financing with venture capital. You know, I would not be surprised if that was the history of the PlayStation VR, like the original PSVR headset. And then at some point they brought those, they either bought out that company or signed some contract with them the second time around and had them produce the PlayStation VR2. You know, like it's not hard to assume that these things happen when companies are this large and they have this sort of group. They have an arm in the company which does that. So the life insurance group was holding up Sony during the PS3 cycle. Oh, really? I didn't know that. So they've got subsidiaries in Singapore. I don't know what is this? They have a different logo. Oh, they're located in Minato. So that means they're like literally they're in kind of like the upscale part of Tokyo. They're in Minato. That's the really nice area. That's where like Ginza is. Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't even know how we got off on this tangent of talking about phones, but yeah, that was basically it for the stream. What's funny is we have the highest concurrent viewer count in this last hour, and we're at the very end of the stream. So, yeah, that's what happens when these things go really long. We went 3 hours. All right, guys, well, that's gonna be it for this stream. I might make a video about that Nvidia new control panel thing. I'd have to update to it and see, and figure out if the old one is hidden in there. The camera sensors. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, the cameras are in like so many different things, not just phones, but yeah. All right, guys, that's gonna be it for this stream. Once again, thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel and you like this sort of content, feel free to subscribe so that you would know when I go live. Because sometimes I go live on the weekend, but not always. But I do this live show every Thursday at the same time. So if you want to stay tuned for that, then get subscribed to the channel. And occasionally we'll do uploads on specific topics or like tech-related content, reviews, that sort of thing. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get on out of here. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. Thanks.